Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto trained from a young age by Jiraiya of the Sannin and grows up with the training he deserves. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked with saddened eyes at the young boy sat on the hospital bed. The boy himself was young, barely 5 years old, yet he had cold and indifferent eyes that did not belong to a child of his age. The boy had shaggy blonde hair, slightly tanned skin, shining cerulean blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. His name, Naruto Uzumaki, on of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Naruto was no normal child, not only because he is the last known Uzumaki and the son of the Yondaime Hokage, but because he is the jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Yoko, the strongest of big-tailed beasts. A creature of such great power that it could reduce mountains to rubble and cause tsunamis with a single flick of its tail. And yet, this boy was the single thing stopping this creature from laying waste to Konoha. One would expect the inhabitants of this village to praise the child for being a hero, for holding this creature at bay. They do not. Ever since the child was born on October 10th, he had foolishly told the civilian and shinobi council of what the boy held. Instead of seeing the child as a hero, they hated him. The shinobi clans ignored his existence, while the civilian council had sent in total 30 assassins after the boy. 10 of which had nearly succeeded had it not been the timely intervention of the Anbu and the medics. Then there was the fact that every October 10th, a group of drunken civilians and shinobi would hunt down and attack the boy. This night was no different. While a child would normally spend their birthday surrounded by family and enjoying the day to its fullest, Naruto had instead barricaded himself inside his apartment away from the mob of villagers outside. It had done nothing as they got inside and began to beat him. The Anbu team that had been placed to protect the boy from such attacks had not intervened. Thankfully, one Anbu operative intervened. Naruto's single most protective Anbu, Inu. This Anbu operative was also known as Kakashi Haddock, the Yondaime Hokage's only living student. Kakashi had always looked up to Minato as a father after his real father's suicide, so it was only natural that he would look at Naruto as a little brother. Sensing someone appear behind him, he knew exactly who it was. "How's he, Hokage-sama?" Kakashi asked. Hiruzen spared the Anbu a look and saw that he had forgotten his mask. "We can thank the boy's tenant for his current survival." Kakashi winced, and Hiruzen knew that the young man must have felt guilty for his inability. "Do not blame yourself, Kakashi-kun. You did all you could." He placed a hand on the man's shoulder to calm his trembling body. "It's not fair," Kakashi finally said after calming down. "It's not fair. Naruto never asked for the Kyuubi to be sealed inside of him, nor would Minato-sensei put the Kyuubi inside of his own son unless there was no other choice. And yet, the villagers praise Minato-sensei as a savior, but nearly kill his son. Life is not fair, Kakashi-kun. We must accept that," Hiruzen said. "Now, I believe it's time we say hello to young Naruto." Kakashi nodded his head and the two entered. As soon as the door opened, Naruto's head looked towards his 2 new visitors and smiled upon seeing them. It was heartwarming to see such an innocent and happy smile displayed on the face of a boy who suffered so much. "Hello, Naruto-kun." The Sandaime greeted. "Hello, Jiji." Naruto replied before he looked towards Kakashi. "Hello, Kakashi-nai." Despite his earlier anger, Kakashi smiled at the greeting he received. It released him from some of the guilt he felt at not been able to save Naruto in time. "Hello, Ataudo." If anything, the boy's smile grew wider at what Kakashi called him. "How are you feeling?" Hiruzen asked. Naruto's smile dimmed and became slightly strained. "I'm fine, Jiji," Naruto said boisterously. To any other person, it might have seemed convincing. However, Kakashi and Hiruzen were the 2 top shinobis that Konoha had to offer, so they easily picked on the sadness been hidden away. "It's okay, Ataudo. You can tell us how you really feel." Kakashi stood beside Naruto and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Instantly he felt how skinny the young Uzumaki was and had to restrain himself from getting angry. By the way that Hiruzen looked at him, the elderly Kage must have known what Kakashi was angry about. Naruto's smile dropped after Kakashi's words and was replaced by a look of sadness and dejectedness. It was unsettling to see. "I don't get it, why they hate me. It hurt so much, and yet." Naruto's voice was low and quiet. "I can't hate them. I want to, I really want to. But no matter how much I try, I can't." "Don't hate them, Naruto-kun. Pity them." Naruto looked up towards the Sandaime in shock. "Hate will forever cloud your judgment. It will stop you from being who you should be." Hesitantly, Naruto nodded his head. "I'll try, Jiji." Hiruzen smiled. "That's all I can ask." He stood up from the chair he was sat on. "Now, we will leave you to rest." Naruto nodded his head and laid down on the bed once more. The 2 shinobi disappeared in a quick Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, and appeared in the Hokage office. There was a few moments of silence as Hiruzen sat on the chair behind his desk and Kakashi placed his dog mask back on. Did you ID any of the attackers? Kakashi nodded his head and placed a scroll on the desk. Hiruzen reached forward and took hold of the scroll and began reading through it. Once he had done he placed the scroll back on the table. I want them taken to Ibiki for questioning. Kakashi nodded his head before disappearing in a Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique. You can come out now, Jiraiya-kun. There was a flicker in the corner of the room and it revealed a slightly aged man with spiky white hair pulled back into a ponytail with a wart on the side of his nose. He had a green short shirt kimono and matching pants, under which he wore a mesh armor that was revealed at his wrists and ankles. He wore handguards, a black belt, traditional Japanese sandals and a red haori with 2 yellow circles on it. How do you keep on finding me? Jiraiya exclaimed, causing the Sandame to chuckle in amusement. How much do you know, Jiraiya? He asked and Jiraiya became serious. His eyes becoming colder and more serious, once again he was forced to remember that despite his childishness, Jiraiya was a true shinobi. Everything. The assassinations, the beatings. Jiraiya paused, allowing himself to gain control of his anger. Why didn't you call for me, sensei? There was a hint of desperation in his voice. Konoha needed you to keep track of the spy network. Hiruzen explained. Jiraiya snarled and slammed his fist on the table. Behind him, the Sandame's Anbu guard appeared around Jiraiya, their swords drawn and pointed at Jiraiya's valuable organs. Bullshit. They disappeared back into the shadows from a single hand gesture from the Hokage as Hiruzen stared into Jiraiya's anger-filled gaze. He is my godson and it is my duty to look after him. I know. But Konoha needed you watching her enemies. Jiraiya stood back up, calmer than he was before, but still brimming with anger. Today, however, I believe that Naruto should be raised outside of the village. Hope filled Jiraiya, perhaps he could finally raise his godson. Does that mean? Yes. You can raise Naruto-kun, train him, and make him the best damn shinobi that this world has ever seen. Hiruzen said and Jiraiya nodded his head smiling brightly while he did so. He's in room 9. Thanks, sensei. He said sincerely before disappearing with a Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique. Hiruzen looked at the position where Jiraiya once stood. Already he could feel a change in the air, Naruto would play a large part in the future to come. It had been an hour since he arrived at the hospital. Naruto had been asleep the entire time and Jiraiya for the first time in a while got to see how much Naruto resembled his father, but he could still see parts of Kushina in him. It made him smile brightly at the thought of raising the child of the two people he considered his children. Outside the sun was just beginning to raise as morning began to come around. However, a groan from the hospital bed stopped him from doing so. Looking up he saw Naruto rubbing his eyes to help wake them up while looking around. Once Naruto's gaze settled on Jiraiya, it regarded him curiously but in a guarded fashion. Hello. Naruto started, his voice was just as guarded as his eyes. Hi. Jiraiya stood up and immediately took note of how his godson tensed in preparation of an attack. He would have found it impressive as not many genin or chunin had instincts like that, but it was his 5-year-old godson had instincts that were only gained by being constantly attacked. I'm Jiraiya. He decided to forego his usual intro, knowing that doing so wasn't very smart at this time. Boo. Jiraiya would have found that insulting, however. Naruto wasn't the academy and therefore wouldn't have learnt about Konoha's history of legendary shinobi. Jiraiya of the 3 Sannin. I'm one of Konoha's top shinobi. He took great joy in watching Naruto's eyes alight with joy. Really? Naruto exclaimed. How strong are you? There were multiple questions that were asked to him in rapid fire. Wait, why are you here to see me? There was something in his voice that Jiraiya didn't like, dejectedness. Well, this might come as a shock to you. But, I'm your godfather. There was a few moments of tense silence in which Naruto stared at his newly revealed godfather in shock. You're my godfather? He said hesitantly and Jiraiya nodded his head. Yes, I'm really sorry for not being here to raise. Naruto simply sat there staring at him. I wanted to raise you, but after the Kyuubi attacked Konoha we were in a weak position. I'm Konoha's spymaster and I had to watch what our enemies were doing. However, I've been allowed to finally to take you as my apprentice and truly be the godfather you need. Once again silence reigned. You mean it? Naruto asked hopefully. I mean it, kid. Jiraiya reassured and both shared a smile. The doctor said that you will be allowed to leave today. I'm going to get some stuff then sign you out and then we're going to leave Konoha for a while. Nodding his head happily, Naruto watched his godfather leave before giving a shout of joy once he had left. After collecting Naruto from the hospital, Jiraiya and his godson had quickly moved through the town before any of the civilians woke up. They then headed over to a shop called Higurashi's weapon shop. Naruto had never come here as he had been constantly kicked out of shops before and had not wanted to be kicked out of another one. Entering the shop, Naruto looked around at the multitude of weapons lining the walls. Spears, axes, swords, kunai, shuriken and multiple other different weapons. Jiraiya watched him with a smile before turning to the large and muscular figure that had just entered from the back door. "Hello, Jiraiya-sama," the man said. "Hello Tatsuhiko, how's business?" Jiraiya studied the man, despite having developing a friendship of sorts that wouldn't stop him from killing the man if he so much as looked at his godson in a way he didn't like. "Business is good. Is that?" Jiraiya nodded his head stiffly, something which Tatsuhiko took note of. "Don't worry. I've got nothing against the kid, been working with too many kunai and scrolls to know the difference between the two." Jiraiya nodded his head. "So what can I do for you?" "Need 100 chakra conducting kunai and shuriken." "Well, you're in luck." Tatsuhiko picked up a box and placed it on the counter. He turned it around and opened it up, revealing the required amount of kunai and shuriken. "Just made these last week." "Tatsuhiko, old friend. You are a godsend." Tatsuhiko chucked an amusement. "How much is that?" 10,000 ryo. Nodding his head, Jiraiya handed over the required amount of money. "Clothes still in the back?" Tatsuhiko nodded his head and Jiraiya walked over to his godson. "Hey Naruto." Showing his godson the box, he allowed Naruto to take it. He watched the boy look at him in awe and happiness. "Go on then. Open it." Naruto did just that and opened the box, revealing. "Wow." He hugged Jiraiya in thank, and while shocked, Jiraiya returned the hug. "Thank you. You want to be Hokage, don't you?" Naruto nodded his head. "Well, if you're gonna be Hokage you're going to need these." Naruto once again nodded his head. "Now, let's get you some clothes." With that, the two walked towards the clothes section and bought Naruto around 4 pairs of the same clothes. Black shinobi sandals, Anbu pants, a grey, long-sleeved hoodie with a full-body mesh armor. Overall, the shopping trip cost him around 20,000 ryo, but seeing his godson smiling made it worth it. Kakashi watched Naruto leave with Jiraiya for God knows how long. While it was saddening to watch, he knew that it was for the best, and he also knew that he would see Naruto again. Whether it be in Konoha or on a mission. Turning back towards the village, he looked at the civilians that were completely oblivious to what had happened. Kakashi knew that if the civilians and shinobi had known, they would have celebrated. Clenching his fists, Kakashi vowed to himself to always be there to protect Naruto. With that in mind, he walked towards training ground 10, where he knew Mido Guy, his self-proclaimed rival, would be training himself into the ground. He had calmed down in his training over the past weeks, it was about time he made up for lost time and then surpassed his previous level of strength. Hiruzen sighed in anger as the paperwork miraculously multiplied before his very eyes. He really hated the seal he had placed there within his first year of being Hokage. Sure, it decreased the amount of stuff on his desk, but just as you thought you were nearly done, the seal would automatically release more paper until you were done. It had its pros and cons. Hearing the door to his office open, he saw his old teammate Danzo Shimura walk into the room. His cane tapping against the ground. It had been a safety precaution the two had created to know if there was an imposter. "What is this I hear about the Kyuubi jinchuriki leaving the village?" Danzo asked, his voice calm and quiet. "I have decided that after the last attack on his person, his godfather, his legal guardian should be given custody of him." Hiruzen stressed the word legal to show Danzo he had no sway here. "Besides, I thought you would be happy. Naruto is getting the training he needs to become a powerful asset to the village while being able to walk in the light. He will become a figurehead for the village to follow. The village hates him. They will not follow him." Danzo countered. "Not yet, they won't. Naruto will come back for the Chunin exams and there I shall reveal his heritage. The village will forget what he holds and see him for the person he is. And if not, everyone does." Hiruzen's eyes became cold and indifferent, a small amount of his killing intent was released. "Then I trust you to persuade and silence those that do not if need be." Danzo nodded his head, happy to see that the shinobi no kami, the god of shinobi, had replaced his grandfatherly teammate once more. "It shall be done, Hiruzen." Bowing as much as his damaged body would allow him, Danzo left the room. "It seems you leaving, Naruto-kun. Maybe what Konoha needs to become a symbol of power once more." Hiruzen thought. The week went by rather quickly in Naruto's opinion. They had done nothing but traveling, but during the time they would rest, Naruto would try and unlock his chakra. So far Naruto had managed to draw out a bit of his chakra, which according to Jiraiya, was very impressive for a child his age, as most children descending from shinobi clans didn't get this far till they around 3 months had gone by. "Are we there yet?" Naruto whined. Jiraiya, who walked alongside him, simply shook his head in amusement. "Nearly. In 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1. He outstretched the digits on his raised left hand before slowly lowering the number of digits until none remained. "Here we are." They exited out into a large clearing. A very large clearing. At least 10 acres of land. Right on the north of the clearing was a large pond, easily covering 2 acres of land. Going into it from the cliff behind it was a waterfall. A few meters away was a small wooden hut, it was nothing special, but it would suffice for the two of them. Everything else was just grassy flatland. "Awesome." Naruto shouted out in glee before rushing out into the clearing with a wide smile on his face. Jiraiya watched his godson for a few moments, happy to see the young boy had forgotten his previous trauma. After that he turned around and placed his hand on the ground, channeling some chakra into it. He watched as multiple seals stretching out of the area glowed blue. Nodding his head he walked back towards the center of the clearing, to where his godson was laying on the ground looking at the sky. "Do you like it?" Jiraiya asked while placing his scroll on the ground. "Like it, I love it," Naruto exclaimed. "I'm glad. This is gonna be your home for a few years." Clapping his hands together, Jiraiya sat down in front of Naruto, who had also sat up to stare at his sensei. "So we're gonna continue working on unlocking your chakra. Once that's done I'll teach you a jutsu." "Really? What jutsu, Jiraiya-sensei?" Both had agreed that revealing himself as Jiraiya's godson would be detrimental if any enemy shinobi found out. "A jutsu that I believe only you could fully master, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique." Jiraiya smiled when he saw Naruto brimming with excitement. Looks like he had a way to properly motivate Naruto when the boy wasn't into doing something. "Cool. Come on then, Jiraiya-sensei, I want to learn that jutsu." With that, Naruto willed himself to calm down, crossing his legs and placing his hand into the ram seal. Closing his eyes he breathed in and out deeply. He searched deep inside of his very being and only ever found darkness. Reaching further inside of him he found himself staring at a blue flame of complete chakra. For a few moments nothing happened before slowly it spread throughout his entire body. He felt a sense of weightlessness as chakra ran through his body. "I did it." Jiraiya laughed along with Naruto. "Well done." He congratulated and Naruto beamed up at him. Standing up, he stared at the young Uzumaki who was staring at him inquisitively. "Now it's time to teach you the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique. It only requires on-hand seal, and that's this." He crossed his fingers over each other. "Then simply channel your chakra and imagine a clone appear next to you." Nodding his head, Naruto placed his fingers in the exact same position as Jiraiya did. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique." He shouted and there was a single poof of smoke. Once it subsided, it revealed an exact replica of Naruto. Both shared a glance before grinning identical grins. Jiraiya felt pride swell in him. It took him 3 hours to create even a single clone, but Naruto did it on his first try. "Very good, Naruto." The clone disappeared, leaving only the original stood there. "Just remember that if you summon too many, be careful on how many you dispel at a time. That's because when it dispels, anything they learned, you learn." The Uzumaki grinned wider and nodded his head in agreement. "So what we doing now, Jiraiya-sensei?" "Well, I'm gonna teach you tree climbing, and then tomorrow we'll make some clones, and I'll make sure you have it down." "I can already climb trees, Jiraiya-sensei." The elderly shinobi smirked before walking towards a tree, Naruto following behind him. However, once he reached the tree, Jiraiya continued to walk up it. When he reached the top, Jiraiya turned around and stared at the awe-filled gaze of his young apprentice. Walking down the tree, he stood before Naruto with a grin. "Can you climb them like that?" he asked and only received a slow shake of his head, which made him chuckle in amusement. "To do this, all you need to do is channel chakra to your feet to help you stick to the surface. Here." He chucked a kunai at Naruto's feet. "Use that to mark your progress." Picking up the kunai, Naruto ran at the tree as fast as he could and channeled chakra to his feet. As soon as his right foot collided with the bark, it exploded, sending him flying backwards. Thankfully, Jiraiya caught him before he could land painfully against the ground. "You channeled too much chakra into your feet. Try not to channel as much into your feet next time," Jiraiya advised. Nodding his head, Naruto charged at the tree once more. This time, however, he managed to get 3 steps up the tree before slipping. Landing on the ground with a grunt, he glared at Jiraiya, who had burst out laughing at his failure. "Shut up," he shouted, earning more laughter as a result. Getting to his feet, Naruto charged at the tree again, and like the previous 2 times he fell. This time, however, he managed to mark the tree with his kunai. Giving a shout of accomplishment, Naruto did it again. Behind him, Jiraiya looked on proudly as his godson began to make gradual progress. It was slow, but he had no doubt that by the end of the day, he would get halfway up the tree if not higher. Shisui gave a sigh as he sheathed his tantum after finishing his night's training session. Normally he would be accompanied by Itachi, his best friend and brother in all but blood. However, Itachi was currently attending a meeting with his father, Fugaku, the head of the Uchiha clan. Just as he was about to deactivate his Sharingan, he noticed a slight movement in a bush nearby. That was odd, there was wind and nothing else moved. Expanding his senses with chakra, he immediately noticed that there was someone hiding there. They were very well hidden, but he was an Anbu, the elite of Konoha, and therefore he could easily pick out the signs of someone hiding. "You can come out now, I know you're there," Shisui called out. There was a few moments of silence before a young boy, no older than 9. It was a shock to him to see someone so young had such skill in stealth. It was obvious the boy was trained extensively in the shinobi arts. "Hi, are you lost?" he asked, though he had tensed in preparation from an assault made by the young boy. The boy himself noticed this and also tensed in preparation. "Not much of a talker, huh?" he questioned once more upon seeing the young boy not speaking. "At least tell me more your name." "Mine's Shisui Ichiha. Komimaro Kagaya." The now named Komimoro's voice was distinctly monotonous. "Mind telling me why you're here?" Once again the boy did not reply, but his silence spoke more than he ever could. It was obvious Komimaro was here to kill him. "Did Kiri send you? You don't wear their headband signifying your allegiance to them." "I don't work for those Kiri scum," the boy said with a surprising amount of venom in his voice. "Then who do you work for?" Shisui questioned further. "My master told me to tell you that the snake hides in waiting until the correct moment to strike presents itself. Prepare yourself, Shisui Ichiha." With that, Komimaro shot forwards at great speeds. Surprised by the speed that Komimaro moved at, Shisui barely had enough time to leap backwards to avoid the bone sword that appeared from Komimoro's wrist. His eyes widened in shock and Shisui rolled along the ground before using a quick Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, to put some distance between the two of them. Chikatsumayaku, dead bone pulse. Shisui thought in shock. This fight just got a whole lot more difficult. Komimaro and Shisui stared at each other before the young Kagaya charged forward. Ready for the boy this time, Shisui ran through some hand seals quickly before taking a deep breath. Kaiten. Msenka no Jutsu, fire style. Phoenix Age fire technique. From Shisui's mouth 5 large balls made entirely of fire shot towards the charging Komimaro. The young Kagaya reacted quickly and jumped through a small gap between 3 of them, his clothes slightly burned as a result. As soon as he landed he only saw Shisui form the tiger seal. Kaiten. Karakenden, fire style. Fire dragon flame bullet. He felt heat building up behind him. Just as he looked behind him, he saw a large flaming dragon rise up and charge towards him. Jumping to the side, Komimaro dodged the attack and it caused the ground beneath his feet to become alight with flames. Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, ninja art. Shuriken shadow clone technique. Looking towards his target, he saw 3 shuriken multiply into 300. Inagi no Mai, dance of the willow. Bones sprouted from his palms, elbows, knees and shoulders, then he spun around madly. Each of the shuriken that came at him were parried and knocked into other shuriken. For seconds the only sound that reverberated through the training ground was the sound of bone and metal colliding with each other. Through it all, Shisui thought of a plan to help him defeat the Kagaya. This is not looking good. He's fast, durable, agile, and there seems to be no limit to the areas in which he can create those bone weapons of his. Seething at the way this was beginning to turn out. That and the fact I have barely 1/5 of my chakra left. Damn it, the one time I don't bring any solid or pills and Itachi has a meeting is the one time I get attacked. Looks like I'll have to call Itachi and stall for time. Channeling chakra into his Anbu seal, he waited. Komimaro landed on the ground and charged straight towards Shisui, who met his charge head-on. Shisui blocked the left hand bone blade before ducking under the right hand one. A quick Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique later and Shisui appeared behind Komimaro. His blade cut through the air and then cut into Komimoro's neck. To his surprise however, the blade didn't cut into the boy's neck like he had hoped. Instead it colliding with something very dense and hard. Quickly placing his foot on the Kagaya's back he pushed off and flipped into the air and caught a glimpse of what he assumed to be an armor of bone underneath Komimoro's skin. Landing on the ground, Shisui charged forward taking advantage of the boy's current position of being off balance and lashed out with a roundhouse kick. He then followed up with spinning hook kick to his temple. Skidding across the ground, Komimaro got to his feet quickly before hunching over in pain as a fist collided with his stomach. However, his ribcage burst from his body and locked the Anbu shinobi's fist in place. Smirking, Komimaro punched Shisui in the face, causing him to stumble backwards. Using this, he allowed the power of his Orochimaru's no Juinjutsu, Orochimaru's cursed seal technique, to run through his body and cover his body in lines. Raising up to his full height, he regarded Shisui with an indifferent but slightly confident gaze. What the hell is that? Shisui thought in shock. Whatever it was, Shisui knew that this fight wasn't going to be as equal as it was before this. To force me to use the first level of Orochimaru's no Juinjutsu, Orochimaru's cursed seal technique, you are truly skilled, Shisui Ichiha. Komimaro praised mentally. However, Orochimaru-sama has asked me to kill you. He cured me of my disease and I shall forever be loyal to him, for that reason I cannot fail him. Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique. He whispered before disappearing and reappearing behind the Kagaya boy in hopes of repeating his earlier movement. This time however, the blade was stopped by a blade made of bones. The same attack won't work a second time round. Komimaro said simply before performing a flawless spinning hook kick that Shisui only just managed to avoid due to his Sharingan predicting the attack. Landing on the ground, he went for a low sweep that the Kagaya managed to jump over. The two young shinobi put some distance between one another. "Come on Itachi, where the hell are you?" The Uchiha raged mentally. "Shit. I'm running low on chakra and I might have to rely on Susanoo soon with the way things are going." Clenching his fists, Shisui charged forward, his Sharingan spinning hypnotically. Kimimaro met his charge and the two met in a clash of bone and steel. Itachi rushed through the trees as quickly as his legs could possibly take him. 5 minutes ago he had received an Anbu distress call from Shisui. He had quickly rushed from his house, leaving his parents unaware of what had caused him to leave in such a hurry. Just as he leapt from one branch he felt a fluctuation of chakra before he heard FKTMN. Tatapa, wind style. Great breakthrough. A large amount of wind collided with his body launching him from the air and straight towards the next tree. Drawing a kunai from his pouch he stabbed it into a tree and used it to slow him down before dropping to the ground. Standing up to his full height, he waited calmly as 5 shinobi, each nin level in terms of strength. Despite his calm facade, he was in fact frustrated because someone out there was causing his brother and all but blood lots of trouble. Enough to call for help, he couldn't remember a time when Shisui had called for help. "Just wait for me a bit longer Shisui. I will be there soon." Itachi thought. "You are in my way. I will give you the chance to move before I go through you," Itachi said monotonously. The 5 enemy shinobi shared a glance before staring at him with confidence. "You think you can beat us?" The one in the sneered. "There are 5 of us and only one of you. Numbers count for nothing in the shinobi world." Itachi replied before the man that spoke dropped to the ground unconscious with drool hanging from his mouth. "Shit. Jinjutsu, don't look at his eyes." One claimed as he closed his eyes and jumped backwards. 2 others followed his lead, but another was already stood completely still. Appearing behind the man with a kunai in hand, he stabbed the kunai into his neck. Meijin. Jubaku Satsu, demonic illusion. Tree binding death. Itachi thought before turning to the remaining 3 shinobi. "Come." Du did so and stabbed him in the stomach however, Itachi exploded consuming the 2 in flames. "Ah!" One shouted as he jumped out of the flames clutching the stump that used to be his right hand. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know, but we can't lose here. You lost the moment you got in my way." Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, ninja art. Shuriken shadow clone technique. From the flames, hundreds of shuriken flew forwards and only the injured shinobi managed to leap out of the way in time. However, he took his eyes off his surroundings to instead watch as his comrade get riddled with shuriken. In doing so he didn't see the flash of silver until he saw Itachi land on the trunk behind his comrade. Slowly his head fell from his shoulders and landed separately to his body on the ground. "I'm coming Shisui, just hold on." Leaping backwards he avoided a fist from Kimimaro that was surrounded by spiked bones. Sometime during the fight, Kimimaro had sprouted bones on both his forearms and made the Kagaya's already formidable Taijutsu even more dangerous. He had long since lost his tantm and was forced to constantly dodge Kimimaro's strikes. However, in this time he had managed to regain some of his chakra, enough to use Susanoo, but he didn't have enough chakra to use a Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique or his chakra sensing abilities. This gave him a very steep disadvantage and was forced to use small bursts of chakra to avoid Kimimaro's attacks. He was also forced to use his other senses to figure out where his help was. He knew from the sounds of combat that the Anbu who had received his distress call were been held up by other enemy shinobi. Leaping backwards he avoided another jab and just as he landed in a crouched position, 5 Anbu shinobi appeared around him. Their katana are tantm drawn and each of them in their kenjutsu stances. Smiling, Shisui rose to his feet and released a deep breath. "About time you guys got here." Shisui replied jokingly with a smile on his face. "We were held up by multiple missing ninja." Hawk answered gaining a nod of the head from Shisui. "How did they even get in?" "Crane has taken one of them to Ibiki. We will know who they work for soon." Kimimaro stood where he was calmly. Slowly dropping to his knees, it looked like he was surrendering. Shisui and the Anbu watched as he placed his hand on the ground. "Shit. Juga." Hawk shouted as they felt a huge influx of chakra from Kimimaro. Shisui just barely managed to get out of the way as the entire training ground sprouted huge bones that pierced through the bodies of the Anbu shinobi. He watched Kimimaro slowly rise to his feet and say one thing. "Saorbi no Mai, dance of the seedling fern." Then Kimimaro began to change even further. He had a tail with 4 large bones sprouting from his back, his skin became dark in color. Under his eyes were 2 black curved-like markings and the same where his eyebrows used to be. "What the hell is that?" Shisui thought in shock. Whatever it is, his chakra just became more vile and disgusting, but it also became much larger. "Damn it, if I can only get hold of one of the soldier pills in Hawk's or the other's pouch." Tensing his muscles he shot forward only for Kimimaro to appear in front of him, appearing from the bone directly in front of him. The Senka no Mai. Hana, dance of the clematis. Flower. His entire left hand was encased in a drill-like weapon made entirely of bone. It was raised and pointed straight at him, and due to his previous jump, he was unable to move out of the way and instead found himself impaled by the bone weapon. With a scream of pain, Shisui lashed out with a kick to Kimiro's stomach, putting some distance between him and his opponent. Landing on his back, he clutched his stomach. Shakily, he raised his left hand and looked at the large hole in his stomach. It was bleeding heavily. He knew he wasn't going to last much longer unless he applied some medical chakra to the wound. Looking up, he saw Kimimaro jumping towards him, intent on finishing him off. Knowing that he didn't have the strength to move, he allowed his eyes to evolve even further to the Mangekyo Sharingan, kaleidoscope copy we lie. Channeling all his chakra into his eyes, he shouted. Susanoo. From his body, a large green warrior figure formed around him protectively. In the center of his chest was a single glowing red tomo. Kimimaro slammed his drill weapon into the chest of the Susanoo. It forced the warrior-like figure to be pushed backwards. The Kagaya had to quickly leap backwards as one of Susanoo's arms went to swat him away. Once he landed on the ground, Kimimaro moved his right hand around till it rested on his back. The Senkan no Mai. Tsuru, Dance of the Clematis. Vine. The man's entire vertebrae was ripped from his body and formed a long sword. Shisui raised his right arm, which held a drill lance. Fire formed into vortex. With a roar, Shisui thrust his right hand forward. Kimimaro stood tensed and waiting as the drill came closer and closer. Itachi saw the top of Shisui's Susanu's, and he knew that whoever was fighting Shisui had made his friend desperate. There was a loud explosion followed by a large plume of smoke, and Itachi knew that he needed to get there quickly. Channeling chakra into his legs, he pushed his body to the limit. The sun was rising up into the air as morning was coming round. He needed to get there quickly. When Jiraiya woke up the next day, he found that Naruto was already practicing the tree climbing exercise. To his shock, he found that Naruto was running from the top to the bottom as fast as he could. Last night when they had finished, Naruto had only been able to run just over half of the tree. Now he could run the entire thing repeatedly. "Boy, Naruto. Come down here." Jiraiya shouted as he walked towards the tree. Naruto quickly ran towards him and stopped before him. He had a huge smile on his face and once again was filled with envy of Naruto's stamina. Truly, the boy's limitless stamina would be one thing that made Naruto a dangerous shinobi to face. If he couldn't defeat you in pure skill, but he could defeat them in a battle of attrition. "Did you see that? I managed to do it, Jiraiya-sensei," he said excitedly. "I did, Naruto, I'm proud of you." If anything, the Uzumaki's smile grew wider. "How long have you been out here?" Naruto adopted confused look. "It was only just getting light," Naruto said, much to his shock. Judging by the position of the sun, he would say it's around 9 in the morning. That meant he had been out here for around 3 hours. "That's impressive, Naruto. Now, before we begin working again, let's get something to eat." Nodding his head, Naruto and Jiraiya had a quick but healthy and nutritional breakfast before walking out into the center of the flatland. "So what we gonna do today, sensei?" Naruto asked excitedly. "Well, I want you to make as many clones as you can." Nodding his head, Naruto crossed his fingers together and channeled as much chakra as he could. "Age Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique." He shouted and there were multiple poofs of smoke, and when it subsided there were at least 100 copies of Naruto. Shaking his head in amazement, Jiraiya gave a proud smile. "Amazing. Makes me wonder how much chakra he really has," Jiraiya thought. 4 copies himself appeared in a cloud of smoke. Each of the clones took a group of 25 of Naruto's clones and took them to different areas in the clearing. "So what we're going to do is start with a few exercises. So, you better get running around the clearing." Naruto quickly did so and began running around the clearing. Jiraiya was following behind him. Around 3/4 of the way around the clearing, Naruto began to slow down, but Jiraiya would throw a kunai at his feet, forcing him to increase his speed once more. Humming to a stop, Naruto collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. Despite his large amount of stamina, he was only 5 years old. "We're not done yet, Naruto. Now give me 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups and 50 squats." Naruto panted and glared at Jiraiya before pushing himself into a kneeling position. "Can't I rest for a minute?" Jiraiya shook his head. "You want to be the best shinobi in the elemental nations. You want to be Hokage?" Jiraiya questioned, giving a nod of his head. "Then get to it." Groaning, he began to do the exercises. Over with the first Jiraiya clone, he was having them continue the tree climbing exercises until they could do it without conscious thought or much effort. With the second clone, he was beginning to teach the water walking exercise to Naruto's clones. But the third, he was teaching leaf balancing exercise, and with the fourth he was making sure that Naruto's clones could use the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique, without hand seals or speaking. All the while, Jiraiya watched his new apprentice Godson train with a proud smile on his face. Breathing deeply, Shisui stood inside the safety of his Susanoo as he waited for the smoke to clear. Once it did, he found his body freeze in shock. That was because Kimimaro was completely unharmed, his Susanoo drill weapon had been knocked to the side. The Kagaya's spine weapon was wrapped around it like a whip. How? I put 3/4 of my remaining chakra into that strike, even though I hardly have any. No one should be able to stop that. Growling angrily, Shisui channeled his remaining chakra into one final attack. If this didn't work, he would be without Susanoo and completely open to an attack. Susanoo. Tsukumo, he with the ability to help by all means. 99. The ribcage opened revealing his Susanoo's chest. From it a barrage of light green-colored chakra needles were launched at great speeds towards Komimaro. Once again smoke rose up into that air as a result was launched into the air. Dropping to his knees as his Susanoo receded into nothing, Shisui waited for the smoke to clear again. Teshi Senden, 10-finger drilling bullets. Gasping in shock as multiple tiny projectiles were flying towards him. Unable to move, he took each of the bullets and he felt one pierce his lungs. Komimaro moved forward calmly and self-assured in his victory. However, before he could reach the downed form of Shisui, Itachi appeared in front of him. His eyes were indifferent, giving away nothing about his thoughts and feelings. The tomos of his Sharingan swirled around his pupil hypnotically. Komimaro looked down at the floor, avoiding eye contact with the Uchiha. I had not expected Itachi Uchiha to deal with a missing ninja that Orochimaru-sama had hired so quickly. It seems our intel on his abilities is lacking. Raising his eyes slightly, he looked at the bleeding form of Shisui. Nonetheless, it seems my mission was a success. Shisui will die long before he gets to the hospital and he has lost far too much blood. Even if he does survive, he will be handicapped severely. However, I could probably match Itachi if I had not wasted half of my chakra fighting Shisui. Not only that, but I can sense multiple Junin-level shinobi moving towards our position. A tactical retreat is in order. Itachi watched with narrowed eyes as Komimaro disappeared with a quick Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique. Once he was sure that the Kagaya had disappeared from his senses, he turned to face his dying friend. Hey Itachi. Shisui smiled, but it was an ugly sight as his teeth were stained red with blood. Took you long enough. Itachi allowed a rare smile. Shisui was the only person who could ever make him smile. Save your breath. I'm going to get you some help. Shisui simply shook his head in disagreement. No, I won't make it in time. I need you to do something for me. Itachi nodded his head, his eyes slightly glistening at seeing his best and only friend dying before him. Take my eyes, give them to Naruto-kun. Telling him I'm sorry for breaking my promise. Flashback. Hey, Itachi Nai, Shisui Nai. The two Anbu shinobi in question stopped their training to see Naruto running towards them. Shisui smiled brightly. Hello, there little man. Shisui bent down and high-fived Naruto. What brings you here? He's come to say goodbye to those close to him before we go. A voice said from behind them all. Shisui and Itachi turned around to see Jiraiya stood there. Jiraiya-sama. The two shinobi bowed to him as a sign of respect to the legendary shinobi. Nah, no need for honorifics. You two have looked after Naruto when I couldn't, you've more than earned the right to call me just Jiraiya. The two shinobi nodded their head as thanks. Hey, I'm still here remember. Naruto shouted indignantly, causing the three older men to chuckle in amusement, which in turn caused him to pout. Sorry. Shisui said. So how come you're going with Jiraiya? He's gonna teach me. I'm gonna become so strong that I'll be able to beat you both. Itachi smiled, while Shisui laughed boisterously. I'll hold you to that, Naruto-kun. Itachi replied to Naruto's boasting. I'll tell you what little man. When you get back I will be the first to meet you and then we'll go and have that spar. If you impress me I'll teach you every jutsu I know. Shisui said. You promise? Naruto asked. It's a promise of a lifetime. Shisui confirmed and then Naruto hugged him tightly. Chuckling, Shisui returned the hug. I'll miss you, Shisui Nai, Itachi Nai. Naruto whispered. Naruto pulled away revealing a few tears streaming down his face. Odd little man, you're making me cry. Shisui said and his eyes were slightly watery. Don't mind this miserable git, he will miss you despite what he might say or look like. Naruto nodded his head. Come on Naruto, we gotta go. Nodding his head rapidly, Naruto left with Jiraiya. Flashback end. Itachi nodded his head and shakily reached forward and plucked out his friend's eyes. It tore at his heart when he heard Shisui scream in pain, but he continued to do so. Once it was done, Itachi sealed the eyes away while Shisui moved himself into a seated position. Itachi went forward to push him back down, but Shisui stopped him. No, help me stand up. Hesitantly, Itachi nodded his head and helped stand Shisui up. The older Uchiha had to lean dependently on the younger Uchiha. I need you to kill me, I want it to be by your hand. It'll help you unlock the next stage of the Sharingan. Please. I will do. Pulling a kunai from his pouch, Itachi thrust it through Shisui's ribcage and pierced his heart. The dying Uchiha gasped in pain as blood spilled out from his mouth. Not once did his smile disappear. Gently, Itachi placed him on the ground and watched his friend's breathing slow down. His Sharingan slowly changed into 3 spiraling curves around the purple. Looks like I'm going to see you sooner than I expected, Tucson, Kachan, Abito Nai. Smiling as the faces of his deceased family passed through his mind, he released his last breath. Clenching his fist, Itachi raced back to Konoha with Shisui on his back. Intent on finding out who sent the child that killed his best friend. Hiruzen looked at the missing ninja currently sat in one of the interrogation rooms. The man was bloodied and beaten after the interrogation he had suffered at the hands of Konoha's greatest interrogation specialist, Ibiki Marino. Itachi appeared beside the aged Hokage without any sound. "What did you find out, Hokage-sama?" Itachi asked. Sparing the young Anbu a glance, he could see the desire for revenge. Despite his love for the village, Itachi was still in Uchiha and carried the curse of hatred. "It seems my old student, Orochimaru, was the one who organized this." Nodding his head stiffly, Itachi looked at the man with his Sharingan glowing ominously. "Hokage-sama." The Sandaime looked towards Itachi to see him on his knees before him. "Before Shisui died, he told me to take his eyes and give them to Naruto-kun as a gift. I would like permission to give them to Naruto-kun like Shisui asked." Hiruzen hummed in thought before nodding his head. "Oh. Their location is," he whispered the remaining part so that no one would know where Jiraiya and Naruto were currently located. "Thank you, Hokage-sama." Itachi used a quick Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, and disappeared. Turning to Ibiki, he gave him the signal to kill the missing ninja. Ibiki nodded his head and entered the room quickly. He didn't need to hear the ninja speak to know he was begging for his life. Ibiki paid the man no heed and slit his throat before leaving. A week had gone by since Naruto and Jiraiya had begun training, and in that time progression had been quite quick, having also built up a routine. Every morning they would wake up and review what they had learned the previous day to see how far he could get. After that they would have breakfast, and Jiraiya would think on what Naruto's training would consist of for the day. So far Naruto had completed the tree climbing exercise and the leaf balancing exercise, the two easiest chakra control exercises. Not only that, but Naruto had managed to learn how to use the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique, without hand seals, and had doubled the amount of clones he could create. Currently, Naruto had finished his daily run, which had increased to 3 times round the training ground. Now, he was currently performing his exercises which were now 100 of each exercise. He had 50 clones perfecting water walking, while the 3 other groups were doing a different exercise. The group that had once been doing leaf balancing exercise were now doing kunai balancing. As for the group that had been doing tree walking, they were now learning and mastering the Bunshin Daibakuha, clone grade explosion, while the final group were learning to use kunai and shuriken. So far he could hit 3 out of 10 for the shuriken and 4 out of 10 for the kunai. "Done." Naruto exclaimed with a thin shine of sweat covering his body. "Looks like we're going to have to up your exercises because you're not as tired as I'd hoped." Naruto simply grinned brightly. Kid's stamina and the Kyuubi healing him gives him a huge advantage. "You really are gonna go far," he thought with pride. "Show me your stance." Naruto sunk into simple fighting stance. Side on with his left leg at the front and his right foot at the back. His right hand was raised up to his chin with his left hand bent downwards, so his hand was near his left hip. Moving forwards, Jiraiya pulled Naruto's left elbow out some more, while also widening the gap between his legs. Looking towards the edge of the clearing, he formed a Kage Bunshin, shadow clone, that looked over Naruto's training in the Todorikiryu, Roaring Dragon, style, a style designed by the Uzumaki clan. It implemented both grappling, elbows, knees, defensive, offensive and counter-offensive techniques. It was one of the most dangerous fighting styles to ever exist in the elemental nations. As he walked towards the edge of the Fuinjutsu barrier he set up, he placed his hand on the ground and 2 seals glowed blue. Slowly the area in front of him shimmered revealing Itachi Uchiha. "Come on in." Itachi did so. "So what brings you here, Itachi?" A week ago, an unknown Kagaya clan member working for Orochimaru infiltrated Konoha and killed Shisui. Jiraiya looked towards the original Naruto to see him currently been corrected on his next move in the Todorikiryu, Roaring Dragon, fighting style. "I see. Is that everything you need?" Itachi shook his head and unsealed a small jar filled with water. Inside of them were 2 eyes, 2 Sharingan eyes. "Are those?" "Yes, Shisui gave me his eyes before he died. His wish was for Naruto to have them." Jiraiya gave a strained smile. "Thank you for giving me these." Itachi nodded his head before leaving. Looking down at the eyes, he then moved towards his apprentice. Releasing a deep sigh, Jiraiya walked towards Naruto and dispelled his clone. "Who was that, Jiraiya-sensei?" Naruto asked while repeating his kata. "That was Itachi." Naruto stopped what he was doing and looked towards his sensei. "Itachi Nai? What did he want?" "He came to tell me that an enemy shinobi infiltrated Konoha and killed someone." Naruto looked a bit downtrodden, but not entirely heartbroken. "Naruto, this is going to be hard for you, but the shinobi that died was Shisui." There was a few moments of silence where the young Uzumaki said nothing before he bowed his head. His hands clenched into fists tightly. Itachi also gave me these. He held out the jar with Shisui Sharingan eyes inside of them and Naruto took hold of them. They're Shisui's, aren't they? Jiraiya nodded his head. Yay, he wanted you to have them. Naruto looked up at Jiraiya with tears in his eyes. Who killed him? Naruto whispered once more. If I tell you, promise me that you won't get revenge. Naruto glared at him and Jiraiya knew exactly what he was thinking. I know the feeling, Naruto, the desire to kill the person that killed someone close to you. But that's what shinobi have been doing to each other for years. I don't care. Naruto said quietly. You should. Jiraiya nearly shouted. Me, the Hokage, your father, we all wanted to bring peace to the shinobi world. If you only trained for the sole purpose of revenge, you would be turning your back on everything we worked for, everything your father worked for. Naruto bowed his head and Jiraiya mentally baited himself for forgetting that Naruto didn't know of his heritage. However, it seemed to have worked as Naruto didn't seem as dead set on revenge as he was before. Shisui wouldn't want you to do so either. Naruto didn't say anything, just turned and disappeared inside the house. God damn it, Orochimaru, you just had to do this. Hopefully Naruto would make the right decision. Naruto hugged the jar that had Shisui's eyes inside close to his chest. They were the only thing that remained of one of his older brother figures. Slowly he allowed his mind to play over what his godfather had said to him. Clenching his fists tightly, Naruto stood up from his position on the sofa and walked out of the door with his mind set on what he planned to do. When he opened the door, he found Jiraiya waiting for him. I've made up my mind. Jiraiya studied him for a few moments. I want you to train me harder than you did before. Jiraiya crossed his arms over his chest and stared straight at him. And what do you plan to do with the power you gain? I want to become so strong that no one will dare hurt those I care about. And if someone did, I want to be strong enough that I can protect them. Jiraiya nodded his head. Then you better get ready, Naruto. You thought it was difficult before, it's about to get much harder. Naruto nodded his head. He didn't know where he was. The last thing he remembered was placing Shisui's eyes on his bedside table before crying himself to sleep. Now here he was, in a sewer. The water around him was up to his ankles, but it seemed to be made entirely of chakra. Following the path he came across a very large cage, made entirely of red bars. Moving forwards he looked closer into the dark abyss that was the cage. Come closer, Ninjin. A demonic voice sounded from behind the cage. With it, Naruto watched two eyes appear. Each were blood red with a black reptilian pupil. More of the mysterious revealed itself until Naruto found himself staring at a large orange fox with rabbit ears and 9 swishing tails. Naruto slowly stepped forward, but he quickly stopped just as a claw stopped a mere hair's width away from his face. Next time you won't be so lucky. The beast taunted. Why, you're the Kyuubi. Naruto stuttered. The Kyuubi grinned savagely. I am Ninjin. The Kyuubi confirmed. Why are you here? The Yondaime killed you. The Kyuubi snorted and laid his head down on his front paws. I wasn't killed, no human could kill me, so he sealed me away inside of you by your Yondaime Hokage. It informed him. You're what you call a jinchuriki. A human sacrifice. Naruto repeated in questioning. That's what it means, yes. Leave, Ninjin, I have no care for your presence. Naruto stared at the Kyuubi with curiosity. I said leave, Ninjin. The Kyuubi roared, but Naruto continued to stare at him. What are you staring at? What would happen to you if I died? If you died, I would die. Despite him being only human, the Yondaime was skilled in Fuinjutsu. The Kyuubi looked especially disgruntled by this fact. You better not die, Ninjin, I refuse to die. Then help me. Naruto spoke up, gaining a puzzled look from the Kyuubi. Help you? The Kyuubi repeated. Yay. I don't want to die, you don't want to die. So we help each other. The Kyuubi sneered. I refuse to work with someone as weak as you. Naruto clenched his fists. But you make a good point. Get stronger, Ninjin. Then I'll consider working with you. Naruto unclenched his fist and then smiled brightly. Happy that his suggestion hadn't been shot down. With that, Naruto left his mind. Intent on becoming strong enough to work alongside with the Kyuubi. With its power, he could do anything. 3 months passed quickly for both master and apprentice. In that time a lot of things had changed. Naruto had managed to increase his total amount of clones from 200 to 600. Now he had 5 groups training, instead of 3, all of them made of 120 clones each. One group would continue to work on his chakra control exercises, incorporating both kunai balancing with tree walking and water walking for extra difficulty. He had another group going through the katas of his Todora Kiryu, roaring dragon, fighting style, making sure to commit them all to muscle memory. The next group would train and master one of Jiraiya's original jutsus, Hari Jism, Needle Jism, and the jutsu that deprived from it, Hari Jigoku, Needle Hell. He had also taught him the Kawarimi no Jutsu, body replacement technique, and the Henge no Jutsu, transformation technique. Then he had a group working Fuinjutsu. 50 would be working on calligraphy, while the remaining 50 would read through the books on Fuinjutsu. The next group would work on his elemental affinities. Jiraiya hadn't taught Naruto any jutsus, but he had been teaching Naruto the chakra control techniques. Surprisingly, when he had tested Naruto's elemental affinities with chakra paper, it had revealed 3 elements: wind, fire and earth. Naruto, however, was dead set on learning to use all 5 elements. While he barely made any progress with water and lightning, his natural affinities had progressed nicely. Jiraiya hypothesized that in another few months, he could begin teaching Naruto a jutsu for each of his natural affinities. Jiraiya estimated that Naruto was about low genin level in terms of strength and didn't show any signs of slowing down. Currently they were traveling towards a small nearby village for some supplies. The village itself was quiet, only a few stalls and homes. The population was also quite small, and so, their whereabouts would be kept quiet for a while. As a shinobi you could never frequent an area more than a few times before an enemy would find your location. Entering, Jiraiya and Naruto found that the village became tense as soon as they arrived. As a result, Naruto noticed that Jiraiya had also tensed in preparation. While not understanding why his godfather had become so tensed, Naruto prepared himself anyway. After all, if his godfather had told him to follow his lead. Stay close, Naruto. Nodding his head, Naruto did as his master had told him. The two walked towards a small stand and bought a few months' worth of supplies and vegetables before moving towards a few other stands. Each time buying a certain type of food ranging from meat, fruit, etc. That will be 100 ryo. The shopkeeper said while handing over a bag filled with potatoes. Here. Handing over the required amount of money, he took the bag and gave it to Naruto. Taking the bag, Naruto sealed it away inside a scroll. What's going on here? He asked. The shopkeeper looked around before shaking his head as a sign of him refusing to speak. Looking around, Jiraiya slipped a small amount of money into the man's hands. The shopkeeper looked down at it before slipping it into his pocket while looking around to see if anyone was watching. They came about a year ago. Took 10 of our children and disappeared. Every month they've been coming round and taking our children. I can't say any more, they kill anyone who speaks. Jiraiya nodded his head. Here. Jiraiya slipped him a small piece of paper. On the day that they are to arrive, just burn this and I'll come and help you out. The shopkeeper looked shocked but grateful at the same time. Thank you, Jiraiya. And you are? Hashiro. Thank you again for this, Jiraiya-san. Chuckling, Jiraiya scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. Don't mention. Just doing what I can. The shopkeeper smiled and nodded his head. Come on, Naruto. We gotta get back before it gets dark. Naruto nodded his head and the two made their way back towards the cabin. Both of them unaware of the figure watching them from the distance. How interesting. A man with ash-gray hair pulled back into a ponytail and black-rimmed circular glasses as he stared down at the retreating figures of Naruto and Jiraiya. Orochimaru-sama will want to know of this. But first. His eyes straight to the shopkeeper. It seems the people of this village need to know that Orochimaru-sama's will is not to be forgotten. Channeling chakra into the seal on his wrist, the young teen waited. Hiruzen looked at the young teen across from him. Itachi Uchiha had not been doing well after the death of his best friend, Shisui. He spent every waking minute either training or going on high-class missions. From B-class and upwards. The young Uchiha had hardly spent any time within the Uchiha clan compound, unable to face his clan who were planning coup d'etat on the village he loved. Recently, however, Itachi had learned that his father planned to accelerate his plans to execute the coup d'etat. Negotiations had failed, all that remained was the inevitable violence. Something they couldn't afford at this current time. You summoned me, Hokage-sama. Itachi said stoically. Placing a scroll on the desk, he rolled it over to Itachi, who took it into his hand and unfurled it. The young teen's eyes widened in shock slightly before he replaced it with a look indifference. You wish me to kill my clan members involved in the coup d'etat? Yes, if this is too much let me know and we will find someone else that is willing to do this. Hiruzen stated. Itachi straightened his back and shook his head. No, I will do this, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen nodded his head. Then Itachi Uchiha, I as Hokage of Konohagakure, order you to eliminate the Uchiha involved in the coup d'etat. Itachi bowed lowly and then left with a Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique. Sighing, Hiruzen knew that whatever happened, Itachi would forever be scarred by what happened. Hashiro woke up with a start as he heard a few people scream in shock and terror. Looking at his waking wife, he stood up and moved towards the window. Terrified of what he might see, he slightly parted the curtains and looked outside. People were being funneled out into the streets. 5 children were held in a cage with multiple men, and women each stood around searching everywhere. Some were on roofs, others acting as enforcers on the ground. All had one thing in common, the headband with the musical note engraved upon it. Moving back to his wife, he shook her completely awake. At the kids, hide them in the cellar and go with them. Neither said anything more, both knowing that if at least one of them present, then the shinobi outside would know someone else was hiding inside. Getting the piece of paper given to him by Jiraiya, he moved towards the fireplace and went to place it in the fire before his wrist was gripped tightly. Looking to his left, he saw a young teen with ash-gray hair pulled back into a ponytail and black-rimmed circular glasses. The teen looked at him in a condescending fashion. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the teen suggested while wagging his finger from side to side. It was then Toshiro found that there were 4 other figures beside the teen. Each were young, around 9 to 8 years old. One was a boy with 6 arms, one was a boy with 2 heads, and there was another incredibly fat boy and a young girl with red hair. Kabuto-sama. He couldn't say any more as a fist from the young red-eyed girl collided with his cheek, knocking him face first in the fire. Toshiro screamed out in pain as he shot out, straight into the arms of the fat boy. "Now, tell me. What did you tell Jiraiya of the Sannin?" He left multiple gaps to stress the seriousness of the situation. I didn't tell him anything important." Kabuto sighed and crouched down low. "Now you see, that's a problem. Because I don't believe you." He turned to the fat boy and indicated to the fire. Instantly Toshiro was thrust face first into the fire and screamed out in pain. "Let him out." Pulling the civilian out of the fire, the fat boy threw him onto the floor unceremoniously. Kabuto went to say something else when they heard a faint crash and a muffled gasp. "Didmaru, Taiya, Seiken and Yukin, find where that noise came from." The 3 shinobi in question did just that. Toshiro tried to open his mouth to say something, but the pain from his burn stopped him. Seeing this, Kabuto smirked evilly. There was a few moments of silence between the 3 of them as they heard the sounds of the house being torn apart. However, that soon turned to screams and shouts from a woman and children. Toshiro could barely open his eyes from the pain, but he did and saw his wife and 2 children been dragged into the room. Each forced down to their knees with a kunai held at their neck. Kabuto made sure that Toshiro saw this before turning back to the injured shopkeeper. "Now, I'm going to ask you one more time. If you don't tell me the truth I will take your children and I will make sure they suffer all mannerisms of experiments and torture. As for your wife, I will allow every man too in Atagakur to have their way with her." Kabuto smirked upon seeing the horror in the man's eyes. "So, what did you tell Jiraiya of the Sannin?" "Everything. I told him everything." He cried out in shock. "Now that wasn't so hard, was it?" Kabuto said with amusement lacing his voice. Standing up, he turned to the fat boy. "Do it, Germ." The boy nodded his head and embedded a kunai into his head, killing him instantly. The woman and children screamed, even more so when they were dragged out of the house behind Toshiro's body. Walking out into the street, Kabuto clapped his hands together once to get the attention of the villagers. "Hello, everyone," Kabuto said boisterously. "For a year now we have worked together in harmony, but now we find out that you haven't been as happy with our agreement as we had hoped. So, we have to make an example." He clicked his fingers and Germ walked forwards and dumped Toshiro on the floor. Toshiro's children were thrown into a cage, separate to the 5 other children, and the wife was given into the chuckling arms of a few male shinobi. Everyone knowing exactly what would happen to her. The next time you think of sharing what happens here with any outsiders, remember what happened today. Itachi looked at the file given to him by Danzo, and it were the list of Uchiha involved in the coup d'etat. In total out of the 2,000 members of the Uchiha clan, only 500 were knowledgeable of what was going on. In his opinion it was both smart and stupid. Smart, because the less people knew of what was happening, the less could tell the secret. Stupid, because Konoha was already in a weakened state from the Third Shinobi War and the Kyuubi attack, the coup d'etat would only weaken them further. Drawing his tandem, Itachi jumped down into the street and instantly found his first target coming onto the street from an alleyway. Inabi Uchiha, a member of Uchiha police force. Just as he was about to move forwards, he found that he wasn't alone. From the alleyway 4 other Uchiha clan members appeared. They were Naka Uchiha, Satsuna Uchiha, Tekka Uchiha and Yushiro Uchiha. Each of them strutted around and carried themselves with an air of arrogance. It was to be expected after all, they were a couple of the select few Uchiha members to unlock the Sharingan. From what he remembered, Shisui had told him that Naka Uchiha was the only other person he knew of to have unlocked the Mangekyo Sharingan. He would have to eliminate them first. Giving a deep breath, he walked forwards towards the 5 other shinobi. Well. Look who it is. The great Itachi Uchiha. Inabi mocked. Paying them no heed, he walked straight towards them. "Hey. We're talking to you, asshole," Satsuna exclaimed. He along with Inabi and Tekka clenched their fists tightly while Naka looked on with amusement. Avoiding Inabi, Tekka, Satsuna and Yushiro, he walked straight towards Naka. There was nothing that indicated he had done anything as he walked past like nothing happened. Slowly, the 5 shinobi dropped to the ground holding their throats, blood spilling through the gaps in their fingers. All the while, Itachi clenched his fist tightly as he now had the blood of his family on his hands. At least, Konoha would be safe as a result. 9 months soon passed by for Naruto and Jiraiya. In that time there had been a change in the 5, nearly 6-year-old Uzumaki. After the news of Itachi becoming missing ninja when he killed a quarter of his clan single-handedly had struck a chord inside of him. He had begun training harder than ever before. Progressing in every way he possibly could. The number of clones he could now create had increased from 600 to 900, each of them stronger and able to take a couple of punches before dispelling. Not only that, but his chakra control exercises were becoming much easier, and Jiraiya had instead got Naruto's clones to try running up the waterfall. So far Naruto could only manage to get about a quarter of the way up before falling. In terms of his taijutsu style, the Todorikiryu, Roaring Dragon, he had managed to gain at least a high genin level in terms of skill. In terms of Kenjutsu he had progressed to level 2 of 10 and he took to it like a fish to water. As for his elemental chakra controls, he had managed to cut a rock with wind, he had managed to burn a rock with fire, and had managed to reduce a rock to dust. In terms of water, he could absorb water from a leaf and could also make a small amount of electricity course through a leaf without destroying it. Next came his ninjutsu. Jiraiya suspected he was about low chunin level in terms of strength. He had taught Naruto 3 additional jutsu and planned to begin teaching elemental jutsu to him when he proved himself capable of handling himself. His weights had also progressed greatly. "So, you ready?" Jiraiya asked. Naruto nodded his head. "You remember what we need?" He nodded his head once more. "Good. I expect you back before it's dark. If you run into trouble, what do you need to do?" Naruto rolled up his sleeve revealing a rather simple sealing array. "Channel chakra into this and it will let you know that I'm in trouble." Jiraiya ruffled Naruto's hair gaining a huff of irritation. Chuckling, Jiraiya opened up an area in the sealing barrier for Naruto to get through. Once the sealing barrier closed up behind him, Jiraiya turned around and summoned as many clones as he could. "Let's work on making this place a bit larger, shall we?" With the way his apprentice was progressing and the amount of clones he was beginning to produce, the clearing he had bought wouldn't be big enough soon. However, there was small piece of him that was worried about something happening to Naruto. 9 months had passed and he hadn't heard a single thing from Toshiro. In the shinobi world, there was no such thing as coincidence, only timing. Toshiro disappearing after he had made his fear of retribution known was no coincidence. While he was afraid that Naruto might get hurt, he knew that his apprentice needed this. He needed to prove himself to not only him, but the memory of his older brother, Shisui. So he allowed it, albeit reluctantly. Kidmaru looked down at the village from his perch upon one of the roofs. Kimimaro, leader of the Sound Four, had given him the mission of testing a young boy who was traveling with Jiraiya of the Sannin. He had multiple other shinobi with him to keep Jiraiya busy while he fought the boy. "There he is," Kabuto said from beside him. Kidmaru spared him a glance before looking down at the young blonde boy walking into the village. "Him?" Kidmaru asked skeptically. "He's barely a few years old." "That is not the point. The point is, he pointed towards Naruto who was buying some food, is Jiraiya of the Sannin's apprentice. While young he is no doubt skilled." Kidmaru paused before nodding his head in understanding. "Orochimaru-sama wants you to force him to use the extent of his abilities. Even if it kills you. If you do as Orochimaru-sama asked and survive, then he shall gift you with an Orochimaru no Juinjutsu, Orochimaru cursed seal." "I know that." Kidmaru snapped. Well, he was grateful for Orochimaru for saving him, fighting a child was beneath him. However, the reward of greater power was more than enough to make him do this task. "Then why are you still here?" Kabuto asked mockingly. Clenching his fists in anger, Kidmaru jumped down, so he was in front of Naruto, with around 20 meters in between the two of them. Naruto studied the six-armed individual with something akin to confusion and wonderment, however, that soon turned into wariness as his eyes took in the headband. "Are you the reason this village has been suffering?" Kidmaru sneered at the boy. "And if I'm part of the reason, then I'm going to ask you to stop." Kidmaru laughed mockingly. Slowly he calmed down, but those watching could still see his amusement at the threat. "Is that a no?" "Yay, it is." Clenching his fists, Naruto lowered himself down into his Todorikiryu, Roaring Dragon, defensive stance. Kidmaru smirked and ran through a set of hand seals. Kumo-sanka, spiderweb flower. From his mouth, 4 nets that looked much like spiderwebs launched towards Naruto at great speeds. Reacting quickly, Naruto jumped backwards and avoided the nets before summoning a single shadow clone. The clone charged forward and Kidmaru instantly pulled out some golden-looking gum, one for each hand, that looked like a boomerang in shape with multiple tiny spikes decorating it. His arms spread wide and Kidmaru said, "Kumo Nenkin, spider sticky gold." Seeing these weapons, the clone of Naruto pulled out 2 kunai while continuing his charge. Kidmaru met the Uzumaki's charge head-on, and 2 of his golden boomerangs locked with Naruto's, while his other 4 slashed at his chest, causing the clone to disappear in cloud of smoke. With a flick of his wrist, 5 shuriken appeared in between his fingers and he threw them towards the 6-armed shinobi. Quickly, his hands blurred through a set of hand seals and channeled chakra. Shuriken Cage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shuriken Shadow Clone Technique. The 10 shuriken then numbered around 200 or more. Knowing that he didn't have enough time to get out of the way, Kidmaru formed the ram seal, and from every pore of his body came the same gold-like substance that formed his weapons. The shuriken impacted against his skin before dropping to the ground, having left no mark on the armor. What the hell is that? This is my Ninken no Yoroi armor of sticky gold. Nothing you do will pierce through this armor. Kidmaru stated, his voice filled with arrogance. He can still speak, meaning that air can get through it. I don't have any Futon jutsus, wind-style techniques, but the Dakujiri, poison fog, could probably work. However, the villagers will also be affected. He looked around at the area before coming to a single thought. I need to get him out of the village and I won't have to worry about bystanders. 2 more clones appeared by his side and charged towards Kidmaru. One thing he noticed was that the 6-armed shinobi was stiff in the way he moved. Obviously, the word sticky in the name of the technique was not just for show. The first clone struck with a straight jab to Kidmaru's chest, however, when he tried to pull away, he found his fist stuck to the armor. Just as Kidmaru was about to strike, the second launched off the first and kicked him in the face. Grunting, Kidmaru managed to stay in his position only because the armor was stuck to the ground. Seeing this, the second clone flipped over Kidmaru just as the second clone said 2 words. Bunshin Daibikuha, clone grade explosion. Kidmaru's eyes widened in shock as the clone exploded. Kidmaru screamed in pain, despite the flames never reaching his body, the heat from it still caused him a great deal of pain. The second Naruto clone waited as Kidmaru appeared from the cloud of smoke, his armor still intact but covered in flames. As the form of Kidmaru got closer, the clone waited until he was just on top of him before exploding as well. As a result, the Sound 4 member was sent flying into the forest. Smirking as his plan came to fruition, Naruto followed after him with kunai in hand. Kidmaru growled in anger as he got to his feet. In front of him were a couple of toppled trees. His armor was cracked and it was taking more chakra to make it stick back to his body, the flames having burned away what made it sticky. Knowing that the young shinobi in training would appear soon, he ran through a quick set of hand seals. Kumo-sensei, spider web area. Multiple strands of web shot out from his body and disappeared into the forest. The purpose of this technique was that the displacement of the wind as someone moved would cause the string to vibrate, alerting him of an incoming enemy. He didn't have to wait long as the webs on the right-hand side began vibrating. Preparing himself, Kidmaru gripped his weapons tightly in all 6 hands. He smirked when he saw Naruto charging towards him. Drawing his arms back, he launched them towards the incoming figure. In return, Naruto went through 6 quick hand seals and called out, Hari Jism, Needle Jism. Blonde hair wrapped around Naruto's body and deflected the weapons from Kidmaru. Hari Jigoku, Needle Hell. Ranjushigami no Jutsu, Wild Lion's main technique. Instantly the hair protecting Naruto's body shot forth like needles, and Kidmaru was forced to jump to the side. In doing so, he left himself open for the next attack. This time, he had no time to create his armor, and with him in the air, he was unable to maneuver around the second strike. The hair had formed into a mouth with sharp teeth. He still had one technique he could use. Kumo-sensei, spider web unrolling. From his mouth a large net wrapped around the mouth, stopping it from moving towards him. Naruto leaped from a tree straight towards Kidmaru with his kunai in hand. Kumonendo, spider sticking spit. A tube of the webs launched towards Naruto. It stuck to his chest, and Naruto threw his kunai straight at Kidmaru. Paying the kunai no heed as they were off target, he swung Naruto around into a tree. As soon as Naruto collided with it, he disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Shit. He cursed mentally, then the sound of sizzling reached his ears. Turning to the right and then the left, he saw the kunai he had judged as been nothing, had an explosive tag wrapped around the handle. Double shit. There was a loud bomb as the birds in the forest shot from their nests. Coughing, Kidmaru jumped out from the smoke and looked around for any sign of his enemy. However, his eyes instantly picked up on the sight of multiple more explosive tags. One set off and then a chain reaction set off the rest of them. For at least 2 miles, everyone saw the explosion that followed as a result. The Budo found himself practically buzzing with excitement. This mission had turned out to be more informative than he could have ever hoped. Truly, the young Uzumaki boy was skilled. Well, he wasn't fast enough, strong enough or skilled enough to get in close quarters with Kidmaru. He more than made up for it with his Orochimaru-sama will be especially pleased by this turn of events. He was instantly knocked from the tree he was perched on as the explosive tags Naruto had placed around the area were set off. Acting quickly, Kabuto channeled chakra into his feet and planted himself firmly on the trunk of the tree. Orochimaru-sama will be pleased indeed. Jiraiya took a break from expanding the clearing with Doton Jutsu's Earth-style techniques. The previous 10 acres had become 50 acres. More than enough to fit Naruto's rising army of shadow clones. Grinding up a flask of water to his lips, he took a quick swig of water and allowed himself to relax in the midday sun. Well, it was in October, in the land of fire it was still quite warm, especially in the sun. However, his rest and relaxation time was cut short by a large explosion he saw coming from the village's direction. Naruto. He shot to his feet and raced towards the direction of the village. Naruto had his hands placed into the ram seal as he stared at the cloud of smoke. Waiting for something or someone to come out of it. Slowly it subsided, revealing Kidmaru panting heavily. His body was burnt and damaged with all three of his right arms in varying states of dismemberment. The top-bottom arm was completely gone, the middle was just a stump, and the third had its hand missing. Luckily for the man, there was no blood as it seemed to have been cauterized any wound. "You piece of shit." He roared and launched himself towards Naruto. Akijiri, poison mist. From Naruto's mouth, a large purple fog shot towards Kidmaru, who ran straight into it. Much to his shock however, Kidmaru continued on and pulled out a kunai. Readying it to stab Naruto. "I can't dodge this. I'm going to die, I don't want to die here." He didn't know what happened, something inside of him seemed to respond to his desperation. From his back, chains that were silver in color shot forwards and pierced through Kidmaru's stomach. The Otogakur shinobi gasped in pain as blood spilled out from his mouth. In shock, Naruto stopped his chakra from responding to his will and watched as the chains disappeared, dropping Kidmaru to the ground, bleeding and dying. "Naruto." He heard Jiraiya shout. Turning around, his eyes wide and hands trembling in shock over what he had done. "Are you alright?" Jiraiya said with concern evident in his voice as he kneeled down in front of him. Hesitantly, Naruto nodded his head and Jiraiya hugged him close. That's good. Come on, let's get out of here." With that, the two left, Naruto slightly lagging behind as he still tried to process what happened. Kabuto waited until he was sure that Jiraiya was far enough away before jumping down to land beside the body of Kidmaru. Looking down at the body, he was expecting to find him dead already. To his shock however, Kidmaru was still alive. Well, Kidmaru-kun. It seems you will be of more use to Orochimaru-sama than I had originally thought." Kabuto leaned down and placed his green glowing hands above Kidmaru's chest. Jiraiya looked down at his apprentice as they walked back towards the cabin. He had been quiet the entire journey. He himself was too busy thinking about Naruto's new abilities. He had not expected Naruto to unlock the Konfuksa adamantine sealing chains because it appeared in every 1 out of 10 female Uzumaki and 1 out of 100 male Uzumaki. The fact that Naruto had gained this made Naruto's potential skyrocket. Kushina, while weakened and near death, had managed to restrain the Kyuubi long enough for Minato to seal the Kyuubi inside Naruto. When she had been fully healed and enraged, not even Minato had dared cross her. "Naruto. It's not your fault." Jiraiya finally spoke up, breaking the silence. He knew what Naruto was going through, the horror of one's first kill. Many shinobi were unable to even continue their career choices after the first kill, some even committed suicide to escape the face of the one they killed. "I know what it feels like to kill someone. But that's part of what makes a shinobi. In this world there are only 2 rules that properly count in this world." Naruto looked up at him in confusion, but Jiraiya could see the pain hidden in those blue orbs. "What are they, Jiraiya-sensei?" he asked in a quiet voice. "The first is that only the strongest survive." He waited until Naruto had nodded his head in understanding before continuing. "The second is that it is kill or be killed." There was a few moments of silence, allowing Naruto to digest what he had said. "Naruto, he was an enemy shinobi. If you hadn't have killed him first, he would have killed you in turn. Think of the Hokages, do you think each of them became powerful by not killing anyone? Do you?" He pressed. "No. Exactly. Each of them became who they are by killing hundreds of thousands of men. The Yondaime himself killed over 1,000 Iwagakure ninja in a matter of minutes. What about Kakashi? He gained his moniker as Sharingan no Kakashi, Copy Ninja Kakashi, by only having the Sharingan, he copied his enemy's jutsu and used the same techniques to kill them." Naruto just nodded his head, not knowing what to say. "One day, you will have to kill your enemies, or they will kill you and everyone you care about." "Jiraiya-sensei, why did the Yondaime seal the Kyuubi away inside of me?" he finally asked. Jiraiya froze in shock and looked at his apprentice. "It's just that, you mentioned the Yondaime, and I remembered the Kyuubi speaking of how he was sealed away inside of me by the Yondaime. I just wanted to know why he did it." "That's alright, Naruto. I should have expected that you would eventually meet the Kyuubi, I just didn't think it would be so soon." Humming in thought as he tried to think of how to word what needed to be said. "When a bijk is sealed, it has to be inside that of a human baby. That is because their chakra coils haven't fully developed. If it was sealed inside an adult it would kill them. On that day, you were the only child born on that day, and so the Yondaime used you as the vessel. Don't hate him for his choice, all Hokages have to make difficult decisions for the good of the village. Something you will have to do when you become Hokage. Remember that." Naruto simply stood there, even as Jiraiya patted him on the shoulder and walked inside the cabin. For a few moments, he simply stood there before raising his left hand. Thinking back on the feeling he had when Kidmaru was about to kill him, he imagined the chains once more. The feelings he had due to knowing why the yondaime choose to make him a jinchuriki. Slowly from the palm of his hand, something of similar appearance to a kunai blade appeared. More and more of the same metal revealed itself from his palm. Link after link of chain appeared until the tip touched the ground. He tried to force more chakra into the chains, but nothing happened. It seems this was his limit. If he planned to live a long life and protect those he cared about, he would have to get stronger. Kabuto watched his master slowly rise up from his seated position at his desk. Not much could force his master to break away from his notes when he was making a breakthrough, or what he believed to be a breakthrough. "Tell me, Kabuto-kun, how did Kidmaru-kun perform on his mission?" Orochimaru asked. "Excellently, Orochimaru-sama, this is a list of all Naruto Uzumaki's abilities." He handed over a file that Orochimaru quickly scanned over before placing it on the desk. "And what of Kidmaru-kun?" "Severely injured. His entire ribcage is broken, with one of his right arms missing completely, another is gone from the elbow onward, and the final one is missing its hand. He has third-degree burns covering 3/4 of his body, and his respiratory system is damaged greatly, to the point of being almost unsalvageable." Orochimaru nodded his head. "Prep him. I shall properly reward him for a job well done." Kabuto bowed and left the room. Once the door was closed, Orochimaru chuckled. "Kukikuku, Jiraiya, you sure do know how to find the diamond amongst the rough." The next day marked the start of October. 10 days until Naruto's birthday, including today. Both of them had already finished breakfast and were now stood in the center of the ground. "Right then, Naruto, you know the drill." Nodding his head, Naruto summoned the 900 shadow clones required, but this time he summoned 7 clones. "We're gonna add an extra group to the training regime. I trust you know what they will be working on." Naruto nodded his head. "Good. I want 150 clones to go with each one of mine." Once the clones dispersed to the required areas, Jiraiya then turned to the original. "So are we doing the usual, Jiraiya-sensei?" The master simply smiled in his apprentice's direction. "Yes, however, your weights are been increased. From what I remember I allowed you to take them off, but now we are gonna put them back on and increase them." Jiraiya formed the ram seal, allowing Naruto to prepare himself for the added weight that was about to come. Instantly, 80 kilograms, 20 on each limb was added to his normal weight. Naruto's knees buckled slightly, but he stayed upright. Then an extra 5 kilograms were added to each limb. "Now I'm gonna add an extra seal. This is Nfukintiku, resistance seal. What does it do?" Naruto asked excitedly at the thought of learning more about Kenjutsu. Jiraiya smiled upon seeing this. It seems Naruto had found his resolve once more. That was good. In total, there are 4 levels to this seal. The first is like walking through a powerful gust of wind. Next is like walking through thick snow, then it's like walking in water, then finally it's like walking through mud. Naruto nodded his head. "However, if you go up the levels too quickly it will impair your growth and will have a detrimental effect on your fitness levels." "Come on then, Jiraiya-sensei." Naruto exclaimed. Chuckling at his student's enthusiasm, Jiraiya placed his hand on the bare skin of Naruto's left hand. "Kintiku. Repair 1, resistance seal. Level 1. Jiraiya said as his hand glowed a bright blue. Once he pulled his hand away a new seal was decorating his hand. "You know kid, I think I've made a monster." Naruto smiled at the compliment. Before, he would have been upset by being referred to that. Now though, he knew that to be a monster in the shinobi world was good thing. "Now get to it." Nodding his head, Naruto began performing his exercises. 5 laps around the newly extended clearing followed by half an hour of stretches. Then he would do 200 push-ups, sit-ups, squats and a few other exercises. Once he had done, Naruto found himself doing something different. Instead of fighting Jiraiya and gaining battle experience as a result, Naruto instead found himself cross-legged with his sensei across from him. "Now, today we're gonna take a break from fighting and instead work on learning to bring forth the Kyuubi's chakra." Naruto opened his mouth to say something, but Jiraiya cut him off. "I know, you want to get strong without its chakra. However, at some point you will face an opponent too strong to beat with your own power. Being able to use the Kyuubi's chakra will help you fight such an opponent." "Okay, but I will only use it when I have no choice." Naruto said, and if he was on his feet, Jiraiya imagined he would have stomped his foot down on the ground. The thought made him laugh. "I'd be disappointed if you only use the Kyuubi's chakra after everything I've taught you." Naruto nodded his head in agreement. "So, how am I meant to speak to the Kyuubi?" "All the Kyuubi said was that it would call me when it believed I was strong enough." Naruto paused for a few moments and then asked, "Shouldn't I be able to use its chakra without his help? So why do I need to speak to him?" "Yes, you can use its chakra without its permission, but it will be incredibly painful. With the Kyuubi's help however, you can use it without fear of it taking over and without the pain. Plus kid, it's your mind." That was all Jiraiya said to get his point across. Naruto blushed and scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, and Jiraiya found himself remembering Minato been much the same. "Just meditate, calm yourself and will yourself into your mind I guess." Wow, that was so helpful. Naruto deadpanned only to receive a mock glare from Jiraiya in return. Shut up you little brat. Get on with it. Calming his breathing, he closed his eyes. Naruto looked around the similar-looking sewer and knew that he was in correct area. Following the path like he did before, he found himself standing outside the cage once more. Hey, Kyuubi. Can we talk? There was a few moments of silence. Kyuubi. Again there was silence. He called out to the Kyuubi a few more minutes before growing impatient. Oi, furball. He shouted and received a roar of outrage in response. What did you call me, ninjin? The Kyuubi roared. I called you a few times before that, but you didn't answer. Naruto replied, unperturbed by the Kyuubi's rage. Huffing, the fox lowered its head into its arms. What do you want, ninjin? I want to ask you a few things. The Kyuubi huffed once more and Naruto took that as a sign to continue. Are you the reason my control over water and lightning have increased? Yes. You proved yourself against a six-armed ninjin. The Kyuubi explained. I was wondering if you would assist me in using your chakra. Assist you? The Kyuubi's head rose up and he peered into Naruto's eyes. Yay, Jiraiya-sensei told me that it would be easier to use your chakra with you giving me permission to use it. And why should I help you? It'd be much easier for me to take control of your body if I didn't. Naruto smirked confidently. My sensei placed a seal on me that will suppress your influence and power in case that happened. The fox growled in anger at this snippet of information. Look, I don't like this as much as you. I don't want to use your power, I want to rely on my own power, not yours. Here the Kyuubi stared at him curiously. Normally humans would take his power without caring for what he thought. But, I know that eventually I will face someone too strong to beat on my own and then I'll need your help to beat them. So, is there any way that we can come to an agreement? That doesn't involve me killing myself so that you can escape sooner. He added on at the end. Free me from the seal before you die. Done. Tear off a bit of the seal so that I can see, smell and hear whatever you do. It'll also upon a connection for us to converse. I refuse to be stuck inside a third host with no one to speak to, even if it has to be a ninja like you. Naruto nodded his head. I want your permission to change the area behind this cage into whatever I want. Why do you need my permission, can't I do just that? No. The fox shook its head. 2 years ago you could have, however, now you can't. Why? Growling at the consistent questions, the Kyuubi narrowed his eyes. The area behind this cage is owned by both of us. It's in your mind which makes it yours, but it recognizes my presence and power. Therefore whatever happens behind this cage needs the permission from both of us. Okay, sure. Do whatever you want. Anything else? Yes. I want you to kill a certain man. Who? Naruto pressed for information. You don't need to know his name just yet, but you need to get stronger. Much stronger than you are now. This man was seen as a god amongst men due to his power. When you find him, I shall tell you and assist you. Silence reigned for a few moments where Naruto mulled over the final offer. He finally nodded his head in agreement. You got yourself a deal, Kyuubi. Kurama. Seeing the confusion present on Naruto's face, he elaborated. Kyuubi is a title, if we're gonna work together you will refer to me by my name, which is Kurama. Only you're allowed to use my name, no one else. Naruto smiled before slowly disappearing. Interesting ninja. So, how'd it go? Jiraiya asked once Naruto got to his feet. Two Kyuubis agreed to help me. Judging by the look he received from Jiraiya, the little slip-up had been heard and taken into account. But a quick shake of his head stopped the elderly man from saying anything. Right then. Let's get to work on drawing out the Kyuubi's chakra. We'll only do this for about 2 hours and then we'll go back to fighting. Kidmaru only felt pain, like flames setting alight his nerve endings. Besides the pain, was that he couldn't move. His arms and legs didn't respond to what his brain was telling them to do. Then everything came back to him. His defeat at the hands of Naruto, the pain of having nearly been burnt alive. Naruto Uzumaki, next time we meet I will kill you. He vowed. In the next room, Kabuto chuckled in amusement as he watched Kidmaru lay on the table. He already knew what was going through his mind. That's it Kidmaru-kun, give in to your hate. It will only bring you closer to Orochimaru-sama. Kabuto thought while looking at the file in his hand. You have outdone yourself, Orochimaru-sama. Oh yes, he had no doubt with the modifications that Orochimaru had made to Kidmaru that if Naruto and he were to fight again, it would have a very different end result. October 10th, the day the Kyuubi attacked Konoha, the day Naruto was born. Jiraiya and Naruto were currently walking to Takumi village, located in Land of Rivers. The reason for this visit was to not only buy some more kunai and shuriken for Naruto, but to also find his old teammate, Tsunade Senju. The first thing Naruto noticed was that there was a lot more people present than in the last village he went to. Not only that but they were much livelier. Come on Naruto. Doing so, Naruto followed Jiraiya straight into a small casino. They instantly noticed that there was a large crowd around a small table. Mainly men. They walked towards the table and watched as a beautiful woman with large breasts drunkenly lost more and more money. An even younger woman held a pig in her arms watching with disappointment. Hey, Jiraiya-sensei. Why are we here? Jiraiya tore his gaze away from the woman and looked down at his apprentice. Oh, she's gonna help us replace your eyes with the others. Naruto's eyes widened in shock before smiling brightly up at him. I don't know why you need those fucking eyes. You could be strong without them. Yeah, I know, Kurama. But they can help me get stronger quicker. Besides, they'll help me beat this mystery guy. HMPH, whatever. Naruto shook his head at Kurama's stubbornness. Since the two had created the agreement, the two had been talking. Well, Naruto would talk to the Kyuubi, and the fox in turn would either ignore or complain about annoying ninjas. However, Kurama had been vocal about having the Sharingan transplanted, claiming that Naruto didn't need them. Has he been annoying again? Jiraiya asked. Naruto nodded his head. Ah well, you can't win over everyone. Yay, I know. So, are we gonna get her to help us, or are you just gonna stare at her, Iro-senin? Whatever Jiraiya expected Naruto to say, it was not that. Therefore he attracted the eyes of everyone nearby when his face slapped against the ground. Jiraiya. Tsunade shouted from her position. What the hell are you doing here? Hate Tsunade Haim. Jiraiya said awkwardly, but his eyes began straying downwards towards her chest. Everyone, except Jiraiya and Naruto moved backwards. Jiraiya because he was too busy ogling Tsunade, Naruto because he was too young to understand righteous feminine fury. Iro-senin, what's going on? She looks really angry at you. Dear sweet, innocent, naive Naruto pointed out the obvious. Instantly, Tsunade's entire deposition changed to one of a kind and caring mother. Come here, sweetheart. Tsunade motioned towards her, and slowly Naruto walked towards her. Naruto, don't leave me, please. Jiraiya pleaded after realizing what was going to happen to him. It was too late for Naruto, as Tsunade gripped his shoulder and moved him towards the woman behind him. She in turn gripped hold of his shoulder to stop him from moving anyway. Shizune-chan, you're looking as beautiful as always. Please don't let me get hurt. Crocodile tears were streaming down his face. Forgive me, Jiraiya-sama. Shizune said simply. I'm confused. What's going on? Naruto asked with wide curious eyes. When you're older. Tsunade spoke from her position, then she stepped forwards and slammed her fist into the side of Jiraiya's face. With a scream of pain, Jiraiya was sent flying through a wall and onto the street. Come on, Shizune, kid. Let's get something to eat and drink while the lecher recovers. What's your name? Jiraiya-sensei never told me. Tsunade looked down at Naruto, and despite him reminding her of her younger brother, Nawaki causing her pain, she still smiled down at him. My name's Tsunade Senju, that's Shizune cat. Senju? Are you related to the Shadame and Nidame Hokages? He asked excitedly at the thought of meeting someone related to two of his heroes. Tsunade nodded her head. That's awesome. Do you have the Mokuton, wood style, like the Shadame, or do you have the same Suiton, water style, mastery of the Nidame, or do you have both? Tsunade smiled down at Naruto. No, I don't have the Mokuton, wood style, like my grandfather, but I do have a Suiton, water style like my granduncle, but nowhere near as strong. Naruto went to open his mouth once more, but stopped when Tsunade raised her hand up into the air. How about we wait until we've ordered drinks before asking more questions? Okay. Naruto watched as Tsunade paid for a private booth before taking a seat. After ordering drinks, Naruto waited for a few moments before speaking. How do you know Iro-senin? How strong are you? How many elemental affinities do you have? How? Alright kid, slow down. Tsunade said. As for you questions, Jiraiya and I used to be teammates. I'd say I'm around the same level as Jiraiya and I have 4 elements. What about you? Same questions. Jiraiya's my sensei. He's been teaching me for a year now. That was all Tsunade needed to confirm her suspicions on who Naruto's was. So this is Minato's and Kushina-chan's kid. He looks just like you Minato, but he acts like you, Kushina when he gets excited about something. Tsunade smiled as she listened to Naruto speak about all the training she had undergone. Thought she nearly spat out the sake in her mouth when Naruto told her he had an elemental affinities for everyone. You also gave birth to a monster it seems. So you're gonna be a strong shinobi, huh Naruto? The kid nodded his head with a smile on his face. Yep. I'm gonna be so strong that I can protect everyone I care about. I'm also gonna be Hokage on day. Again, she found herself staring at the image of Nawaki behind Naruto, but this time Dan was behind him. I see. Tsunade gripped hold of her necklace and Shizune spared her a concerned look. So you're back, Iro-senin. She said mockingly. Jiraiya looked positively depressed when she called him that. Naruto moved other on his side of the table to allow him some room to move. Seriously, Naruto. Now, she's never going to stop calling me that. Damn right I'm not. Tsunade agreed. So why are you here Jiraiya? We need your help. He corrected when he looked at Naruto. You see, we have a pair of special ocular tools that we need help in been placed in a certain place. Tsunade knew exactly what he meant. You can't be fucking serious. Jiraiya nodded his head. How the hell did you even get one of those arrogant pricks to give you their eyes? He's dead. Naruto said quietly. About a year ago, an unknown shinobi infiltrated the village and killed Uchiha Shisui. His last wish was for his eyes to be given to Naruto here. There was a few moments of silence where the four of them sat in silence. So, what did you say? Will you help? Fine. Meet me at this address tonight. With that Tsunade got up and left. Shizune bowed to Jiraiya and then followed after Tsunade. You ready, kid? Naruto only nodded his head, unable to trust his voice. Two figures walked through the land of forests, one looked to be in his late 40s, with long spiky white hair pulled back into a ponytail. He wore a green, short shirt kimono and matching pants, under which he wore a mesh armor that was revealed at his wrists and ankles. He wore handguards, a black belt, traditional Japanese sandals and a red haori with 2 yellow circles on it. The next figure looked to be 10 years old, he had shaggy blonde, shoulder-length hair and blood-red eyes with a reptilian pupil. He wore a single black hoodie that was slightly unzipped, revealing his mesh shirt armor underneath. Covering his legs were simple Anbu-style black pants tucked into black shinobi sandals. Strapped to his forearms were arm guards, and on his back was a simple wakizashi blade. It was dark out, the sun having long gone down. Naruto, what are your eyes picking out? The taller figure asked. Nothing yet, Iro-senin. Jiraiya nodded his head. The eyes Jiraiya was on about were a gift from the Kyuubi to Naruto. They weren't really a gift, but more of a way to stop him from relying on the Sharingan as much. In terms of abilities, they allowed him to see things from 10 miles away and allowed him to see in the dark. They should be around here somewhere. The village isn't too far away. What exactly is the mission again? You never told me. Jiraiya looked down at Naruto in confusion. Didn't I? I could have sworn I did. Naruto shook his head in answer, shrugging his shoulders. Jiraiya explained the mission. Well, pretty much there's a group of missing ninja that call themselves the Shinabazu. There are 4 members, here are their profiles. Naruto took the file and read through the contents. The leader of the group was Shura. He was a man with long brown hair, small eyes and red markings on his face. His main weapon of choice was an umbrella that could do multiple things such as shoot senbon, flames, and metal wires, and had a hidden sword inside of it. Then there was Gantetsu, a man of great stature with black hair held back in a ponytail and a black goatee. The only thing of note of him was his great strength. The next member was a very feminine man called Manju with light blue hair held back in a ponytail and black-colored eyes. His outfit consisted of shorts and a purple tank top. The man's main and only showcase techniques was his wire techniques. The final member was a man called Toki with short cropped brown hair and black eyes. His outfit consisted of a white headband wrapped around his head, green armless robes and a drilling device located on his left arm. Overall the group was nothing special. Sarutobi-sensei gave us the mission to eliminate them. But to capture the leader, he believes that there is something more at work. Naruto hummed as he thought of what that could possibly mean. Before he could truly think about anything, his eyes picked up on movement in the village. They're there. As soon as those words left his mouth, the two shot off through the trees. They quickly managed to arrive at the village, and when they did they watched the 4 members of Shinabazu tearing through the village. Naruto. Looking up to his sensei, he saw that gone was his perverted and carefree godfather, instead he was replaced by the battle-hardened shinobi that made his grandfather. You take Gantetsu and Toki. Nodding his head, Naruto shot into the direction of Gantetsu, who was currently in the middle of squeezing the life out of 2 separate people. Appearing, he drew his wakizashi and slashed at Gantetsu's outstretched arms. Lucky for the bulky man, he managed to jump backwards and avoid the slash. A little ways away, Toki only just flipped backwards to avoid a horizontal slash from a clone. Instantly Toki and Gantetsu moved so that they were back to back, while the 2 Narutos covered each end of the street. Everyone, get out of here now. Naruto ordered and the remaining villagers rushed away. You got balls, kid. I'll give you that. Toki said. But you better be prepared to pay for what you just did. He raised his right arm showing off his drill-like device. You're gonna say some it real cliché-like, you'll pay with your life. He made his voice sound deeper to mock Toki. It worked because Toki ground his teeth together. Are you done talking now? I have things to do and places to be. Beating your asses into the ground isn't one of those things. Alright brat, you asked for it. Raising his right arm into the air, he channeled chakra into it and watched it spin around madly. Seeing this, Naruto charged forwards and Gantetsu met his charge. The large bulky man swung his fist round to strike Naruto, but he simply moved his body to the side and simultaneously slapped it to further knock it off target. Gantetsu once again went to hit him. However, Naruto repeated the same maneuver. Gantetsu move. Toki shouted and the bulky man jumped to the side. Naruto quickly ran through a set of hand seals just as Toki exclaimed, Tsuchi Kurenai, Crimson Earth. The drill part of the device shot forwards towards Naruto's direction. Dawn. Datapa, wind style. Great breakthrough. Releasing a large gust of wind, it slammed into the drill and forced it back in the direction it came. Not allowing this advantage to go, he charged forwards however, Gentetsu appeared in his path. Not slowing down, Naruto used the bulky man's knee as a springboard to slam his knee into his chin. Using the momentum the Uzumaki flipped over him and continued onto Toki. Kaiten. Heisakishima, fire style. Ash pile burning. From his mouth, gunpowder covered the area around Toki. With a quick spark made from flint placed in his teeth beforehand ignited the gunpowder. With a scream of pain, Toki jumped out of the flames trying desperately to take of the drill-eye device from his right hand. The heat from the flames having been conducted by the metal. Turning around, Naruto quickly raised both arms in a cross fashion to absorb most of the impact from the kick he received from Gentetsu. Even so, the power behind the kick lifted him off his feet and shot backwards. However, from his back multiple chains shot forward and wrapped around Gentetsu. Using this, he slowed himself down enough for him to safely land on the roof of the nearby building. The chains then receded back towards him and pointed towards Gentetsu once more. Konfsa. Piasu no Maruchi, adamantine ceiling chains. Multi-piercing. More chains sprouted from his back until around 50 silver chains with pointed tips were all pointing straight at Gentetsu. Then they all shot forwards at great speeds, and the bulky man had no way to avoid them. Toki, who had managed to recover, looked over towards Gentetsu to see him been pierced over and over again until there was a single large hole through his chest. Gritting his teeth, he turned towards Naruto, but he knew that fighting him would be hopeless, and so he ran. Seeing this, Naruto quickly used a Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, to appear in front of him with his wakizashi in hand. The end pointing straight towards Toki's heart. Due to the speed in which he had been running, the Shinobazu member had no way to slow down and so found himself pierced through the heart by Naruto's blade. Gasping in shock as blood spilled out from his mouth, Toki dropped to his knees, only held up by the blade in his heart. So when Naruto pulled his blade from its fleshy confines, Toki dropped to the ground face first. "I tell you what kid, it's creepy to see how strong you've gotten." Naruto nodded his head in agreement. Despite killing multiple other enemy shinobi in his 4 years since his first kill, Naruto still had to spend time to get used to what he had just done. After a few moments, Naruto finally returned to normal. "Yay, I still haven't found anyone that give me a good challenge." Jiraiya faked been hurt by clutching his heart. "Stop being an idiot, Iro-senin. I want someone around my level of strength so that I can fully find out my limits. Fighting you right now is getting quite tedious. You know everything about me and I've figured quite a few things about your fighting style. No one has been able to match me blow for blow without holding back loads. I want a fight where I know both sides are going all out." Jiraiya nodded his head, he too knew the feeling well once. "How'd it go other on your end?" "Come on Naruto, have some faith in me." Jiraiya said. "I would if you weren't a hopeless pervert." Naruto began walking only to find that he was alone. Turning around he saw Jiraiya curled up in a ball with a rain cloud above his head all the while mumbling, "I'm not a pervert, I'm a super pervert. Why does no one get that?" Sweat dropping, Naruto shook his head and continued walking paying no mind to his godfather. Jiraiya meanwhile, had recovered and was walking a ways behind Naruto. The boy had changed a lot over the past 4 years. In terms of strength he would place him around Chunin level with an intellectual mind that allowed him to excel. Already the boy had impressive mission record. 100% completion rate, which is impressive considering he had done 30 C rank missions, 10 B ranks and a single A rank. Jiraiya had also introduced Naruto to his extensive spy network and had also begun helping him run it all. There was one problem though. Naruto was reaching his limit. Every shinobi had limitless potential at their fingertips, however, too much power at a young age would destroy the body. Therefore, the body would personally limit itself as a result. Only when a child reached their maturity would the walls that kept their potential locked away would crumble. However, for this wall to crumble fully you must reach your limit before your maturity, otherwise it will only partial break away. It was one of the reasons why there were so little Jimin. For shinobi though, to have your potential be limited was dangerous. It was for that reason that the age of maturity for a shinobi was much lower than that of a civilian. A first-generation shinobi would have maturity at the age of 15. Those shinobi descended from shinobi, whether they be clans or not, would have a maturity at the age of 11. That was the reason why that was the graduation age of the academy. Naruto had been training non-stop, constantly getting stronger and stronger for the first 4 years of his training. Then when he gained the Sharingan, the training increased even more. Using the Sharingan's ability to copy ninjutsu and taijutsu, Naruto could instead focus on mastering that instead of learning. Last year they traveled to the land of iron so that Naruto could begin learning Kenjutsu, and just like with Fuinjutsu, he took to it like a fish out of water. It was only in the past year that they had begun taking missions so that Naruto could gain real-world experience. The only area he hadn't improved was his control over Kurama's chakra. Even with Kurama working alongside him, it was still incredibly potent and poisonous for his chakra coils. He would have to wait until he had hit puberty before he could fully begin to gain control of its chakra. As of right now, all he could do was channel small amounts into his body to increase all of his fitness capabilities. If things continued, eventually the only thing he could improve would be his skill. That alone could make him a powerful shinobi. That was until Naruto reached puberty, and then nothing would stop him from becoming one of, if not the greatest shinobi. To Naruto, the journey was long and uneventful. Unable to learn anything new, only able to make sure that his current skills stayed at their current level. That was one of the reasons why Naruto had spent most of his time this year doing missions. Without the ability to improve his skills, he felt no need to spend his time at the cabin. Proper missions were in short supply as legally, he wasn't a Konoha shinobi and therefore wasn't allowed to do ranked missions. That's why Naruto was registered as a mercenary under the employee of Konohagakure. In that time, Naruto had been all over the elemental nations completing missions and killing traitors of Konohagakure. However, due to the work of Jiraiya, his spy network and the Sandaime his exploits had been kept quiet from the rest of the elemental nations. The two of them were currently entering the land of lightning. Their destination was Kumogakure. There, Jiraiya would deliver the heads of their latest kill. A Kumogakure Chunin that had killed her fellow teammates escorting valuable information on the daimyo's palace's defenses. If this had gotten in the wrong hands, it would have damaged the reputation of Kumogakure, but would have left it weak until a new daimyo was elected. Thankfully Naruto, who had memorized a bingo book, had recognized her instantly and sprang into action. The fight had been quick, she had all but surrendered when Jiraiya revealed himself, allowing Naruto to quickly separate her head from her shoulders. The village gate reminded him so much of Konoha, though the gates of Konoha could have changed since the time he had been away. Halt. One of the gate guards commanded. Jiraiya and Naruto did so. ID is needed for you to enter Kumogakure, he added. Nodding his head, Jiraiya pulled out a single card and showed it to the gate guards. The kid's with me, Jiraiya said, and the guards agreed with him. You will need to speak with the Raikage before you can conduct any business in the village, but I'm sure you already know that, the second guard added. Alright, then Naruto. Let's give this to the Raikage and then we can get out of here. While Jiraiya had nothing against Kumo or its people, the longer they stayed here, the more likely someone was to connect the dots between Naruto and Minato. If they connected those dots, then it wouldn't take long until the entire elemental nations heard of it. The walk was quick. Thankfully it was early morning, 6 o'clock to be exact. Due to the higher altitude the air was thin, but the sun was out much sooner. The Raikage Tower, much to Naruto's curiosity, was exactly the same as the Hokage's. Maybe all the cages had their towers built by the same person. His belief in this was further cemented when he saw the design of the office itself. Exactly the same, except with different colors as the Hokage's. Another difference was the man sat behind the desk. He was over 6 feet in terms height of pure muscle and had black skin color. His outfit consisted of a white haori, large golden vambraces on both wrists. He also wore a golden belt, torn shinobi pants, and Kumo shinobi-styled shin guards and sandals. Jiraiya Dono. It is good to see you again. The Raikage inclined his head as a sign of acknowledgement. Jiraiya returned the nod with one of his own. And it's good to see you as well, Dono. The Gama Sennin, Toad Sage, took note of A's eyes flickering towards Naruto and widening ever so slightly in shock. This is my apprentice, Naruto Uzumaki. Uzumaki? Jiraiya had to stop himself from wincing at mentioning Naruto's last name. He should have remembered that while A was against attacking Uzugakure, he was also a rival of both Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Both had been the only shinobi to ever defeat him. Minato in a match of speed and Kushina in a match of durability. Of course he would recognize Naruto's last name. Tell me boy, who are your parents? I do not know, Raikage-sama. Naruto informed and the Raikage nodded his head, but the brown-skinned Kage gave Jiraiya a glance. That is fine. Now, why did you come here? Jiraiya had to suppress a smile. Unlike the other Kages who spoke in riddles, the Raikage didn't beat around the bush. He wanted answers that were simple and straight to the point. We came to deliver this. He pulled out a scroll and placed it on the desk. As soon as it happened, killing intent was directed towards him and Naruto. Behind the two, a small group of Anbu shinobi appeared and pointed their blades at Jiraiya and Naruto's vital organ. How did you come by this? The Raikage stood up abruptly, his right hand slamming into the desk, cracking it, but not destroying it completely. We had assumed you knew. One of your Chunin killed her teammates and was planning to give this to a Wagakure from what we remembered. Jiraiya informed, and while not fully believing Jiraiya and Naruto were still guilty. She's in your bingo book to prove it. Naruto added on. I studied them both before pulling out a book from his drawer. He flicked through it for a few minutes before grunting. I did not know of this or the mission that authorized such a low-level protection. He placed the book on the table. You have my thanks for returning this information. Meh, it's fine. Jiraiya waved him off. Naruto, why don't you look around the village for a while? Naruto slowly nodded his head and left the room, leaving the two adults in the room. So that's Minato and Kushina's kid? What? Don't act so surprised, he looks exactly like Minato, and the only Uzumaki I know close enough to Minato is Kushina. There was a pregnant pause as Jiraiya seemed to tense. Don't worry, his secret is safe with me. I never hated the two, I respected them. I want to see if their kid will be just as good as them, can't do that if he was killed by a Wagakure shinobi. Jiraiya once again nodded his head and allowed his form to relax. I'm also guessing he is the jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko. Again, Jiraiya tensed, but this time his eyes hardened, reminding everyone in the room that Jiraiya was a cage-level shinobi that had survived through 2 wars. Am I wrong? I questioned. You are. There was more silence as the two stared at one another. What do you plan to do with that information? Nothing. Again. I chuckled in amusement at seeing the shock on Jiraiya's face. Nothing. I will do nothing. Though I would like to see how he stacks against a jinchuriki of my own choosing. He wouldn't stand a chance against your brother. I know. I was thinking the jinchuriki of the Nibi, Yujido Nai. Jiraiya pondered this for a few moments. He could see the pros and the cons to agreeing to this. Well, the pros and the con. The pros was that Naruto would find someone near his age of equal strength and would also be able to see where he needed to improve himself. The con would be the fact that Kumo, a relative wild card so far, would be aware of his abilities. That was a dangerous thing in this world. Jiraiya stood there for a few moments, slowly contemplating the offer before nodding his head in agreement. It would be good for Naruto to not only meet another jinchuriki, but know how to fight one. The theoretical side only worked for so long. Well then, find your apprentice and I shall organize for the stadium to be prepped for the battle. Will do. Then Jiraiya performed a quick Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique. Leaving the Raikage alone in his office, slowly a smirk came across his features as he stared at where Jiraiya once stood. Naruto Uzumaki. Let's see if you have the potential to surpass your parents. After leaving the Hokage Tower, Jiraiya didn't have a clue on where Naruto could possibly be. He looked around the civilian district of the village, then he searched the military district before going to even the red light district. It was only when he felt a brief flare of chakra that he instantly recognized as his apprentices. Sighing as trouble found his godson once more, Jiraiya shot off in the direction that the chakra flare came from. What he found was something he expected. His student fighting against Kumo shinobi. Giving another sigh, Jiraiya jumped down into the area and instantly took note of Naruto and his attackers, wherein. As soon as they saw him they stopped and looked towards him in shock. Naruto was stood, his blade in the air as he held back a single brown-skinned young girl with red hair who was trying her hardest to cut Naruto in half vertically. In his other hand he held a kunai, which was stopping the sword of a brown-skinned boy with white hair. A little ways away, another Kumo shinobi with blonde hair, cut short with breasts already beginning to develop, had just cut through one of his apprentice's clones. Sup Hiro Senin. Took your time didn't you? Naruto commented jokingly while jumping back and landed beside his godfather. What happened here? The elderly man asked in amusement. Naruto himself snorted at the thought of how things came to be the way they were. Flashback. Exiting the Hokage building, Naruto allowed his mind to wander as his body took him on a quick stroll. His mind was alight with new ways to become stronger. It was the only thing he seemed to think of. It was the only thing he wanted to do, grow stronger and stronger so that no one could rip those precious to him away from him. Boy, civilians aren't allowed over here. So get lost. A feminine voice exclaimed angrily. Snapping back to reality, Naruto took in his surroundings to see that he was in a clearing. A training ground no doubt. His eyes then trailed towards the origination of the voice and there he saw a young girl around his age. She was brown-skinned with short spiked red hair with a bandana holding it back. On her back was a small wakizashi. Look at her facial features, he could see that she was angry for some reason. Instantly his mind deduced that she was hot-headed much like he used to be. Hey, I'm talking to you. On Carrie, he's probably lost. A brown-skinned boy with white hair and something in his mouth tried to reason. Let him go. No. Civilians aren't allowed here, that's the law. Always has been, always will be. Carrie continued heatedly. Is that how you treat your civilians in Kumo? Naruto asked with a raised brow. Behind the two he finally took notice of another girl. She didn't have the brown skin of the other two and had short-cut blonde hair. He also took note of her developing breasts and the cold gaze she regarded him with. What did you say? Carrie stalked forwards gripping the handle of her sword tightly until she came to a stop in front of him. You heard me. Naruto smirked at her, loving the reaction he got out of her. It's funny really, you preach about when Konoha's equal and yet Konoha treat their civilians much better than you treat yours. Looks like Konoha will always be better than you. Carrie snarled angrily. That's it you piece of shit. She drew her sword and went to strike at the Uzumaki, only to find that she couldn't move her hand any further. the sharpened edge of her sword stopping just inches away from his head. What the hell? Did you really think that someone as weak as you would be able to hurt me? He regarded with cold indifference, but also arrogance to damage her pride. It was a simple mind game, drive her mad with anger so that she is more likely to make mistakes. Oh god, what do I do? Amoy thought in panic. Carrie's gone and fought this guy we know nothing about. What if he's Akage's apprentice and takes you captive or worse, kills us? What if this guy's the son of a daimyo? There was a few more imaginative what-if scenarios that went through his mind. Then his eyes flickered towards the other person. Samui's not doing anything, but Carrie. His eyes then flickered towards the Redeed to see her thrown away like a rag doll. The Redeed landed on her back with a grunt before getting to her feet. With a roar she charged forwards and went to strike him once more, but Naruto shifted to one side. Due to this unexpected action, Carrie stumbled forwards. What are you two doing? Help me bring this fucker to Reikage-sama, he could be a spy. Carrie roared before sprinting towards him. Seeing this, Naruto summoned his blade from the seal in his wrist and held it by his side. The brown-skinned Kunoichi faltered before continuing her movement. His eyes instantly picked up movement from behind him and saw the boy running at him. His sword also gripped tightly in both hands. Summoning a clone to stop the boy, he turned to face Carrie and raised his sword blocking her downward slash. However, he quickly had to react and pull a kunai from his pouch, using it to hold a second sword at bay. Looking towards the holder of the sword he saw it belonged to the boy. Due to the lack of memories meant that his clone hadn't been dispelled, but it was currently been preoccupied. He assumed it was due to the second Kunoichi. Flashback end. I leave you alone for 10 minutes and you already get into a fight. Jiraiya sighed and shook his head, causing Naruto to give a sheepish laugh. Anyway, we gotta go back to the village and wait for a bit. What for? Naruto questioned curiously. All the while the three young shinobi watched on curiously. Ai's ordered a match between you and a shinobi of his choosing. Nodding his head, Naruto used the Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique, to exit the clearing. Jiraiya meanwhile looked towards the three shocked young shinobi. I would suggest not attacking my apprentice again. I can tell by the lack of headbands that you are still in the academy, no matter how skilled you are. My apprentice would destroy you without much effort on his part. Carrie growled but withheld herself from attacking the legendary shinobi. Samui gave nothing away, and Amoy bowed his head in apology. Seeing this, Jiraiya nodded his head and disappeared the same way Naruto did. Ujido Nai, the jinchuriki on the Nibi, growled as she felt the corrosive chakra of the Biju inside of her course through her body. Even now, at the age of 14 and having trained for 3 years to learn to use her Biju's chakra and still it caused her pain. Slowly she willed it to disappear and once it did she dropped to her knees panting heavily. The strain of using such chakra exhausting her body to its limits. Mind telling me why you came here even though I said I don't want to be disturbed, see? A blonde Kumo Jonin appeared from the tree line and looked at Ujido with amusement in his eyes and posture. Reikage-sama wants you to go to the stadium, you have a fight. Groaning, Ujido got to her feet and stared at C. She rolled her eyes internally when she saw the way his eyes roamed over her body. Even though he was 5 years older than her he was still attracted to her. But she knew it was only lust and not love. Call her old-fashioned, but she would only be with someone that loved her. You should just take him for a ride, kitten. And there was her perverted prisoner and friend, Nibi. Ever since C's attraction to her had been made clear, Nibi had been telling her to have sex with him. Something she vehemently refused to do so. No Matabi. I'm only going to have sex with someone who loves me. Yada, yada, yada. Nibi mocked in her best attempt of Ujido's voice. You can be really boring sometimes. We best go, Ujido-chan. The Kunoichi in question nodded in agreement and the two quickly ran towards the stadium. It didn't take long, despite being exhausted from using her Biju's chakra. However, she could already feel her chakra and stamina been replenished. If she continued traveling at the current speed, then she would be back to full strength in a matter of minutes. When they arrived at the stadium they saw that people were already filing into the stands. She was quite surprised to be honest, while the people of Kumo didn't hate her, they didn't necessarily like her either. Only B, the jinchuriki of the Hachibi was loved by the populace. So she didn't know why so many people were coming to watch the fight. Probably to see her opponent or at least see a Kumo shinobi defeat another shinobi. It could be either or both. Ujido didn't know. Ujido. Turning around, the Nibi jinchuriki turned to see the Reikage and surrogate father stood giving her a small smile. Reikage-sama. She bowed and when she rose she had a smile on her face. One mirrored by A, who in turn indicated with his head for C to disappear. The Kumo Jonin did so and as soon as he was gone, Ujido embraced him. Chuckling, the Reikage held her at arm's length and regarded her for a few moments before frowning. Nibi's chakra is still causing you pain. Hi, I'm training as much as I can, but every time I use it, the pain only gets worse. Instead of seeing disappointment on her surrogate father's face, she saw pride. In her. It seems you're ready for the next stage of your Biju training. That made her smile return full force. After this, I will recall my brother from his mission and have him take you to Genbu. Who exactly am I fighting? The Nibi Jinchuriki questioned, gaining a smirk from the Raikage. Naruto Uzumaki, apprentice of Jiraiya of the Sannin. The mention of the legendary shinobi shocked her. The man's last apprentice had become the most infamous living shinobi, capable of wiping out an entire army of Iwa shinobi in a matter of moments. She couldn't imagine what another apprentice would be careful of. Remember your training. Taking a deep breath, Yujito prepared herself for the oncoming battle. Good luck. Nodding her head, Yujito entered through the front entrance and made her way towards the center of the stadium. Meanwhile, the Raikage watched her leave, his mind thinking on what this would do for her. This will be good for you, Yujito. It will remind you not to forget your shinobi training. He had only been laid on the ground for around 5 minutes when the stadium started filling up. It took another couple of minutes until his opponent arrived and he took note of the natural grace in which he walked. Almost cat-like. Naruto said, mentally earning a snort from his companion. What do you expect, she's the Jinchuriki of the Nibi, who takes on the appearance of a flaming cat. Kurama snarked. Giving a click of tongue, Naruto stood up and turned to face his opponent. Shut up, Kurama no baka. Are you calling baka, ninjin? Kurama roared and Naruto raised his pinky to clear out his ringing air. Don't you dare try and mute me, you Mathurfu. Whatever Kurama was about to say was stopped when Naruto cut off their connection. It had become a sort of routine for the two, both dissolving into an argument and then Naruto cutting the connection. Talking with the Kyuubi? Yujito asked. Naruto nodded his head and gave an exasperated sigh, gaining a small laugh. They don't know when to shut up, do they? Nope. With the Kyuubi, it's all about how great and powerful he is. About how I should feel honored to be even talking to him. You get the picture. Yujito nodded her head. Nibi's a pervert. Plain and simple. This time Naruto laughed, making her smile. Jiraiya-sensei's a pervert. No, he's a self-proclaimed super pervert. They could hear a faint damn straight shouted from the crowd and both shook their heads. But I think yours is worse than mine. Oh yay, I have to deal with a Nibi and her perverted thoughts whenever she sees a decently attractive guy or girl. Snorting in amusement, Naruto turned to face the proctor of their match. He was brown-skinned and silvery white hair extending down to his shoulders with his left eye completely covered. It was only then that they realized that they had missed the Raikage's speech completely. This is so dull. Yujito and even Naruto's sweat dropped at the lack of enthusiasm in his voice. Are you both ready? Well then, begin I guess. As soon as those words were said, whatever friendliness was between them was put aside. Neither of the two dared move before a single coherent thought of acting was shared between them. Yujito went to charge forwards, but stopped when she saw him form 5 clones. One clone charged forwards first, and Yujito met his charge. Yujito opened up with a roundhouse kick that the clone rolled underneath into a crouch with a shuriken in between each finger. A quick flick and 8 shuriken flew towards the female Jinchuriki. Smirking, Yujito pulled out 2 kunai and went to parry them when she heard the clone say 5 words that made her quickly leap out of the way. Shuriken Cage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shuriken Shadow Clone Technique. Those 8 multiplied into hundreds that Yujito only just managed to get out of the way. But every time she moved into the safety of one wave, another would come towards her. While not necessarily important, it allowed Naruto to see how agile and fast she was. I'm getting sick and tired of this. I can't go in for the original as I will be left open to his clone and I'll also be outnumbered. Yujito couldn't see any other way to get to the original without getting rid of his clones. That in turn meant using chakra and allowing the original to see her fighting style. You've got no choice, kitten. He's young, around 10 or 11, which means he can't use his Biju chakra properly. The Nibi Jinchuriki leapt backwards, avoiding another wave of shuriken, her mind focused on what she had figured out. Due to his young age, Naruto was limited to less than a tail's worth of chakra. She however was capable of using all 2 tails worth of chakra in the first version form and only single tail of chakra in the second state. Exactly, kitten, now go get him. Grinning, Yujito charged towards the clone. Rolling underneath another wave before appearing behind the clone. A few seconds later it disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Smirking, Naruto nodded his head in her directions and 2 more clones shot forwards. The first to reach her lashed out with a flying sidekick which Yujito stepped to the side to avoid. Before she could take it out, the second clone gripped her wrist, stopping her punch in its tracks. A sidekick to her stomach from the first clone knocked her to the ground and Yujito had to roll backwards to avoid an axe kick that would have crushed her head. Following this she leaped backwards while simultaneously throwing kunai of her own. A wakizashi summoned by the second clone knocked them all to the side, with the first continuing her charge towards her. The clone went for a straight jab that Yujito ducked underneath before driving her fist into his stomach. The clone went up in a cloud of smoke and in doing so blinded her temporarily. This left her open to the jumping roundhouse kick that collided with her face. The original Naruto meanwhile watched Yujito engage his clones. They didn't last much longer and Yujito turned to face him. He smirked when he saw her panting just a little heavier. Well, he wasn't one to think of plans before he went into a fight. That didn't mean he wouldn't fight before he thought of a plan. No, he created a single plan and if that didn't work, would then think of plans on the go. It had worked for him well so far. Why change it? With another nod, the remaining 2 clones charged forward, both running through a set of hand seals. Pain. Zukaku, fire style. Intelligent hard work. The 2 shouted at the same time and with it, 2 balls of flames rushed towards Yujito. The jinchuriki in question had just finished forming her own hand seals. Izumi Kodama, mouse hairball. Hair shot forwards from her mouth before taking the shape of a mouth engulfed in flames. Naruto at first assumed the mouse would collide with his 2 fireballs, instead it split apart into multiple smaller mice and shot around them. Straight towards him. Reacting quickly, Naruto jumped backwards and watched as 3 exploded as they touched the ground. He had to maneuver his body as quickly as he could to dodge the remaining mouses that shot towards him. Landing on the ground, Naruto summoned 5 clones and used them as a meat shield to slow the advance of the mice. As soon as the smoke disappeared, he instantly leaned backwards to avoid a swipe of Yujito's left hand. Time seemed to slow down as he watched her nails lengthen before everything sped up again. Pain was the first thing he felt, but he allowed his instincts to take over and lashed out with a kick to her sternum. Grunting, both jinchuriki jumped backwards to put distance between the 2 of them, both nursing their respective injuries. Naruto the claw marks on his face and Yujito rubbing her chest. Both shared a smirk and Naruto summoned his sword into his hand while Yujito flexed her claws dangerously. Jiraiya grinned madly as he watched his godson smile happily. He knew from experience that the look on Naruto's face was an indication of him enjoying the way the fight was going. Not many opponents had given Naruto this much of a challenge, and while the fight was just beginning, he knew that Naruto was pushing himself to the limits. Your apprentice seems to be enjoying himself greatly. Stated, gaining a nod of the head from Jiraiya. Yes, can't blame him though. If there's one thing Naruto loves more than training, it's fighting. Kid gets scarier and scarier the longer and harder a fight gets. Hummed as he watched Naruto and Yujito clash in a show of steel and nails. Sparks flying off as tiny cuts began appearing on their bodies. But the smile on both their faces only grew larger and larger. True, Yujito is much the same in some cases. Though she isn't one to enjoy fighting at the start. Jiraiya chuckled as he watched Yujito being forced backwards as Naruto's greater skill with the blade become almost deadly. Deeper and more cuts got through her guard and Yujito could do nothing but maneuver out of the way as best as she could. It seems Uzumaki is getting the advantage. Yes. While Yujito is faster and stronger, giving her the advantage in Taijutsu, Naruto is very skilled with a blade. Could give even Jonin a run for their money in terms of skill. That's to be expected, is it not? And Uzumaki's Kenjutsu style makes even Genin level Uzumaki a Jonin Kenjutsu user a challenge. Jiraiya nodded his head amusement. I remember when Kushina-chan first arrived to the village, still in the academy, and completely destroyed Tsunade in a straight-up Kenjutsu fight. Both men chuckled at the thought of the fierce redhead doing what Jiraiya had said. He emulates both his parents perfectly. But he does, Minato's looks and calmness. With Kushina's brash and love for close combat, let's not forget her durability. Jiraiya added, just as they watched Naruto take multiple hits before slamming the handle of his blade into her face. We can't forget that now, can we? In the room next door, C clenched his fist tightly. His eyes narrowed on the form of Naruto as he watched him say something that made Yujito laugh. Laugh. No matter how much tried, C had never gotten Yujito to laugh at something he said. All she ever did was brush him off with cold indifference, and yet this outsider makes her laugh with barely any effort. He hated it. What made the boy so special that he got the Raikage to respect him, Jiraiya of the Sannin to train him and Yujito to smile? It wasn't fair. They had been teammates, it should be him that she should smile and laugh at. Not the outsider. Barry couldn't stop himself from smiling as he watched his friend and teammate smile. Not even when they were teammates did she smile like that. His eyes unconsciously trailed towards the Jonin box where C was stood. C ain't gonna be happy about this. His friend liked to believe that he was in love with Yujito, but that wasn't the case. C, like many other men, only wanted to earn the right of banging the demon. Groaning at the thought of what his friend might do as a result. This is so dull. Though there was one good thing coming out of this. Yujito would gain a Wakube call. 3 years ago, Yujito had always focused on growing stronger on her own. However, after becoming Chunin, Yujito had become more focused on her learning to control her Bijuu's power. Now she was low Chunin in terms of strength without her Biju. Hopefully this would be a Wakube call that would remind her that the stronger her own abilities were, the stronger she would be when she used her Bijuu's power. He whistled when he saw Naruto swing his sword, sending a wave of flames towards Yujito at point-blank range. Eri had to admit that this fight had been incredibly interesting so far. Both had an edge over the other. Yujito was more skilled in Taijutsu, Naruto in Kenjutsu, Yujito in fire-style ninjutsu, but Naruto's larger chakra reserves made him better overall. Both were rather weak in Jinjutsu due to their lack of using it, all that remained was seeing about the final aspect. Biju chakra. Naruto and Yujito pushed against one another with as much strength as they could muster. Yujito's claws crossed over as she held back Naruto's blade. The two stood there for a few moments before both jumped backwards. Smirking at one another, they both waited and took account of each other's injuries. Yujito's hair had at some point been cut loose, allowing to flow freely down her back, her pants were cut resembling tattered shorts, and her top had multiple cuts and tears. Her smaller wounds had been healed, while the larger or deeper ones seemed to have been cauterized. Though blood still stained her clothes. Naruto on the other hand seemed to be as good as new. It would have looked like he was uninjured, but the multiple cuts and tears in his shirt revealed that he had in fact been injured. Pain. Karakenden, fire style. Fire dragon flame bullet. Yujito and Naruto roared and from her mouth a large amount of flames raced forwards, taking the shape of a dragon as they did so. Naruto wasn't finished, knowing full well that Yujito's dragon would overpower his own easily. Dawn. Repshim, wind style. Gale palm. The wind burst from his clone's hands and combined with dragon increasing its power and speed. When the two dragons met, both went up in an explosion of flames. It still shocked him to know that it took a wind-powered fire technique to match Yujito's own techniques. Not allowing Yujito to get in close, Naruto and his clone ran through more hand seals. Pain. Heisakishima, fire style. Ash pile burning. Yujito knew how dangerous this technique was, having heard tales of it being used by the Sandaime Hokage in all three great shinobi wars. Rushing towards it, she threw her kunai towards the left before performing a quick Kawarimi no Jutsu, body replacement technique, to escape the blast. This left her open to the next attack. Raiden. Hibi Mikazuchi, lightning style. Snake thunder. From the original's left hand a bolt of thunder taking the shape of snake shot forwards and struck Yujito. With a scream, the Nibi jinchuriki was flung backwards before rolling to a stop. Groaning, Yujito pushed herself to her feet, her body still steaming and her hair slightly frazzled. Blowing some hair out of her eyes, she narrowed her eyes at him. Do you have any idea how long it takes me to get my hair straight? Then you go and mess it all up. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto allowed his body to relax and Yujito followed his lead. Then she took note of his uninjured state. It's unfair you know. Your healing ability, it's unfair. Yujito spoke up gaining a chuckle from Naruto as he rolled his shoulder. A pop sounded as Naruto groaned. We're shinobi, we don't fight fair. It was Yujito that laughed this time. True, true. The two smiled as they felt their blood pumping in preparation. In that case. Allow me to show you what I have accomplished. She crouched and her hair began waving in the wind. Her canines lengthened into fangs as her eyes seemed to glow an even darker shade of blue. Naruto instantly took note of this and tensed in preparation, but even he was unable to react quick enough to stop the punch that slammed into the side of his face. The force behind it lifted him up off his feet and temporarily he froze in the air before being flung backwards. With a grunt he hit the ground and skidded and rolled along the ground. Gritting his teeth, Naruto embedded his blade into the ground and he slowed down. Coming to a stop he was once again unable to do anything as Yujito kicked him in the chin. Slamming into the wall, Naruto spat out some blood and watched Yujito walk towards him slowly. Outwardly he looked to be in a great deal of pain, inwardly however, he was waiting for the correct moment. How much longer Kurama? Naruto asked mentally. Not long, your injuries are almost healed. There was a few more minutes as Naruto kneeled on the ground panting heavily as the crowd roared happily at seeing the unknown shinobi been defeated by one of their own. You're done. Thank you Kurama. HMPH, don't mention it. You've lost Naruto. Don't continue, I quite like you. Smirking Naruto pretended to shakily get to his feet. Thanks, but no thanks. Then Naruto punched her unexpectedly. There was a snap as Yujito stumbled backwards and then the Kyuubi jinchuriki followed up with a drop kick to her chest, launching her further away. Both got to their feet and stared at one another before Yujito began laughing. You were already healed weren't you? Yep, just waiting for you to get close. At that, Yujito's grin became downright devilish. Ready Matabi? Give him hell, kitten. Nibi said in agreement and from Yujito's body, power unlike anything Naruto had thought possible burst forth. A blue cloak of bubbling energy formed around her and from it a single tail took place. So this is Ibiju's power. Naruto whispered in shock. In his training he had barely been able to bring out half a tail's worth of chakra and even then it was only for a short period of time. Yet Yujito was able to bring out an entire tail without any strain. Grinning at the thought of a proper challenge, Naruto ripped off his tattered hoodie and mesh armor. While he wasn't overly defined, for a boy his age he had a fair amount of muscle. The one thing that stood out the most was multiple seals decorating his body. Thanks for the strip show, I guess. Snorting amusement, Naruto formed the ram seal before a few of the seals glowed brightly, before disappearing. And what exactly did that accomplish? Wait, seals. That little piece of information made her freeze slightly in shock. He's been fighting this entire time with weights on. Oh kitten, he is perfect. Strong, smart, and in a couple of years' time he will be quite handsome. Despite herself, Yujito blushed. There was something about Naruto that was incredibly attracting, his blonde hair, blue eyes and incredibly adorable whisker marks were part of that attraction. So was his strength. But the main thing was the way in which he didn't ogle her unlike every other man. She wasn't vain, but she knew that she was beautiful. However, that had made it incredibly difficult to find a man who wanted her for her and not how she looked. Her teammate C liked to believe he was that man, but he wasn't. He was just like the rest of them. You ready, Yujito? Smirking, the two shot forwards at great speeds. Samui smiled as she watched Carrie and Amoy sit there in shock as they watched a boy they had assumed to be a spy evenly fight their friend Yujito. All of them knew in a straight-up fight, only Samui could match Yujito, but even she would lose eventually. You just had to go and start a fight with him, didn't you, Carrie? Amoy said. Well said. Girl glared at him. How was I meant to know that he was this strong? Carrie shouted at Amoy, and before another fight could start, Samui intervened. You weren't, he knew that he could beat us and he played with us. Made us believe we had a chance so that he could figure out how we all fought before revealing his true power. Her voice was cold and indifferent, much like her eyes. Giving a click of her tongue in annoyance, Carrie sat down and watched as Yujito began using her Biju chakra. Pick his ass, Yujito. Carrie exclaimed, much to the agreement of the crowd as they too cheered for the jinchuriki. Even Amoy was cheering beside her as they watched Naruto get knocked around. Samui, however, watched in a calculative fashion as she studied Naruto. She could tell Naruto was waiting for something, his lack of action proved that line of thought. It was once again proven when Naruto knocked Yujito back. What the hell happened? Sighing at her teammate's brashness, Samui explained it for the redhead. He was waiting for her to get arrogant before striking. A simple tactic used to turn the tide of a battle if done correctly. Her interest in Naruto was piqued the moment she saw him at the clearing, more so when she saw him fight Yujito evenly. Now as she watched him reveal the fact this entire time he had been fighting with weights made her interested on him completely. Uzumaki Naruto. Let's see what else you can do. Grinning, Naruto gripped Yujito's fist in one hand before throwing one of his own. The jinchuriki's head whipped to one side, but she went with the momentum and spun round and performed a flawless spinning back fist. Placing one foot on her stomach, Naruto pushed off her and backflipped slowly through the air. On. Kaidan, wind style. Air bullets. Multiple bullets of compressed air shot towards Yujito, who barely jumped out of the way in time, though one skimmed her arm and launched her to the side. Using this, Naruto shot forwards and did a quick jab cross jab to her stomach and then a spinning hook kick to her temple. He went to continue after her, however, the area he stepped in exploded. Using this temporary distraction, Yujito shook her head and allowed more Biju chakra to circulate through her body. Slowly a second tail formed and Yujito winced slightly as she felt it temporarily burn her. That feeling soon faded as her body grew accustomed to the potent chakra. When the smoke cleared, she saw Naruto lower his arms as his pants were now shorts and burnt at the ends. She tensed as she crouched into a position. The ground beneath her feet cracking and crunching. He's open. She thought. Wait kitten, whatever Matabi was going to say was cut short as Yujito shot forwards. It was only when the elder jinchuriki got close to the younger did she see the smirk on his face. Seals on his body glowed before disappearing and Naruto leaped out of the way just as Yujito punched the air in which he once stood. Yujito spun round and went to strike once more but found herself unable to move. Looking down she saw chains slowly slithering up her body like snakes. Thrashing around as she tried to break free. It didn't work as the chains only tightened. There's no use. Naruto said as he slowly ran through a set of hand seals allowing her to see each one. The more you resist the tighter they get. He then came to a stop and crouched down. The chains dissipated and Yujito shot forwards but ran face first in a pale blue shield. Uzumaki Fukinjutsu. Tsu no point of Fukin, Uzumaki sealing techniques. 4-point seal. You planned this. Her voice was filled with realization as she looked at the barrier. Yep, but I'm not done. Then he went through another set of hand seals before the 5 points inside the barrier glowed blue. Uzumaki Fukinjutsu. Gajum Shikusoku Fukin, Uzumaki sealing technique. 5 elements convergence seal. 5 seals all positioned in a way that resembled a star glowed blue, in the center of each one were 5 different kanji. Each of them for one of the 5 elements. Fire, wind, water, earth and lightning. From each an attack belonging to that element shot forwards towards a single point, the area where Yujito was stood. There was a loud explosion, and the entire stadium shook for a few moments as smoke covered the inside of the seal. When it dispersed it revealed Yujito on her knees bleeding heavily with chains once more. I'm going to repeat what you said to me. You've lost Yujito. Don't continue, I quite like you. Despite the situation, Yujito smiled, but then she frowned when she felt the chakra cloak around her weakening. It's the chains, kitten. They're absorbing your chakra. Matabi informed, making her eyes widen in shock. I'm guessing you've figured it out. Naruto asked rhetorically. You see, the one thing that makes these chains so deadly is not the fact that they can bind a person completely and I can control them at will, but because they only require my chakra to create them. After that they use the target's own chakra to keep them active when he or she is bound. There was silence as the two stood there panting as the crowd waited with bated breath for the next part. Proctor. Darui looked towards the kneeling Yujito. I surrender. The two shared a nod and then Darui announced the victor. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki of Konoha. There was silence before the civilian sector of the crowd cheered loudly for a well-fought match. Even the shinobi gave a polite clap as a sign of respect for the two young shinobi. Smiling, Naruto walked towards Yujito as his chains dissipated from around her form. Yujito returned his smile and took his hand as he helped her onto her feet. When did you place the seals down? Throughout the fight. Before the fight I placed a seal on the ground that acted as a sort of camouflage for any seal placed on its surface. Then whenever I placed my hand on the ground I would draw part of the seal combination onto it. And due to the camouflage seal, I never knew. Yujito finished. Gotta admit that's good. Thanks. Grumbling in annoyance, the Raikage handed over a large roll of money into the awaiting hands of Jiraiya. The eldest of the two men laughed uproariously as he counted the money greedily. Like I said, you don't bet against my apprentice and hope to win. Even if the odds are stacked against him, he'll find a way to win. Sighing, I stood up and Jiraiya copied him. I will admit, I was too caught up in their fight to notice him place the seals on the ground. Jiraiya nodded his head in agreement, he too had nearly forgotten about that. Like a wise man once said. Never enter a battlefield where an Fukinjutsu master has had time to set up. And while my godson is no Fukinjutsu master, you allowed him time to set up for a battle. Well, it looked like the two were equal. Yujito was dancing to his tune the entire time. Just like his mother and father liked to do. Snorting, Jiraiya walked out of the room followed by the Raikage. It was quite warm in Hai no Kuni, the land of fire. In fact only Kei's no Kuni, the land of wind, beat it in terms of heat. It was something Naruto had always found confusing until it had been explained to him. Hai no Kuni, Kei's no Kuni, Kaminari no Kuni, the land of lightning, Mizu no Kuni, the land of water, and Tsuchi no Kuni, the land of earth, had been named such after the most common elemental affinities. For example, in Hai no Kuni the most common elemental affinity is fire, but in Kei's no Kuni it is wind. It made things much more understandable. Aki, looking forwards to seeing Konoha again? Jiraiya asked as they walked side by side through the forest. Neither were in any particular rush to get to Konoha, the memories of what that place had done to Naruto were still fresh in their minds. However, it was still their home and the home of their parents, therefore it was their home as well. At the age of 13, Naruto had changed quite a bit despite it been only 2 years. He now stood at a height of 5'6" with a lean yet toned figure. His blonde hair had grown slightly, now reaching down to his shoulder blades with it styled to the left so that it came down past his eye. For his outfit, it was similar to his old one, though he had changed the top half of it slightly. Gone was his hoodie, instead it was replaced with a simple black V-neck shirt and a slightly tattered cloak over the top. Over the past 2 years the training he had undergone had once again been upped. Physical training and ninjutsu training had been outholed to instead focus on chakra control and learning to utilize the Kikbi's chakra. That didn't mean he had completely given up on the two, as he would still keep his weights and his resistance seal on and would occasionally have to increase them, though nowhere near at the same rate as he previously had done. Due to the seal his father had created to hold the Kikbi back, also siphoned off some of its chakra and would continue to do so until he reached the age of 20. This meant that every day he would have to spend hours and hours continually gaining control of his chakra because his chakra levels never stopped growing. Even without the Kikbi's chakra mixing with his own, he would still have incredibly large chakra reserves. Mix the Kikbi's with it and Naruto had gained incredibly large, dense and potent chakra. While his chakra control was quite difficult to train due to his ever-increasing in reserves. Learning to use the Kikbi's chakra was much easier. With Kurama assisting him and not trying to possess him, he was already able to use 2 taels worth of chakra. Nah, some people I can't wait to see again. The rest, not so much. Jiraiya chuckled at the response given by his apprentice. Before the two could continue, they found themselves looking at the gates of Konoha. Both shared a glance, Jiraiya's filled with concern for his godson. While he knew Naruto hadn't been in the village for a while, he just hoped that the villagers had forgotten about what he held or learned the difference between the two. If not, well he just hoped that Naruto could beat them all or hold them off until help came. Halt, Jiraiya-sama. You have returned. One of the gate guards exclaimed in shock at meeting one of Konoha's strongest shinobi. The Chunin had brown hair and black eyes with his right eye covered by his hair. He wore the standard Konoha shinobi outfit, but his forehead protector was worn like a bandana. "Yay, me and my apprentice are gonna go see Sarutobi-sensei." The two men nodded their heads as they observed the master and apprentice duo walking past them. They barely even recognized the passes been shown to them by the two before they had entered the village. "Hey Izumo." The man in question turned to face his partner. He had long spiky black hair and black eyes. Over his face ran a single strip of bandage with a colored marking on his chin that was the same color as his hair. He too wore the standard Konoha shinobi outfit. "Eikatetsu? Wasn't that Uzumaki?" Izumo studied the figure belonging to Jiraiya's apprentice and slowly nodded his head. "I think it is, yay." Tetsu grinned and leaned onto the station. "Kakashi-san is gonna be happy he's returned." "Yay, but once the villagers realize who he is they won't be very happy." Izumo added, but Kitetsu shrugged his shoulders, not really caring for the opinion of the villagers. None of the shinobi did, except for those who had no shinobi parents. The journey to the Hokage's office. Thankfully none of the villagers had recognized him at all. This made the journey a little easier, however. Naruto still felt his anger brimming just underneath the surface of his calm facade. It was only the occasional glance from his godfather and the words of how they weren't worth it from Kurama that kept him calm. Yet, as he watched how the civilians continued to live their happy lives, smiling and laughing as if what they did to him never mattered. "I don't get it, Kurama. How can they act like they never nearly killed me?" Kurama sighed as he heard Naruto repeat the same question for umpteenth time. It was really starting to get on his nerves. "I don't know, kid, but you better stop asking before I drag you in here and slap you repeatedly." Naruto gave a small smile at the odd way in which Kurama expressed that he cared. "I've seen you ninja do many atrocious things in my time. What they did to you is one of them, and I've never been any good at helping people. Just take the advice that the old man gave you before you left with the pervert. Don't hate them, pity them." "Fine, but if they attack me I'll kill them," Naruto informed his tenant. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." Before the two could continue their talk, they had finally reached the entrance to the Hokage's office. Looking towards Jiraiya, he saw that his godfather wasn't there. "Come in." Opening the door, he stepped inside to see 4 people stood before the Hokage. One he easily recognized as a Jonin, while the other 3 he assumed to be genin. The 4 figures turned around and stared at him while he did the same. The first one he took note of was the final Uchiha and younger brother of Itachi. He had black eyes and dark hair with a blue tint to it. He wore a navy blue short-sleeved top with the Uchiha symbol emblazoned on the back with a high collar, white shorts and white arm warmers. Next to him was a young girl with long pink hair and emerald eyes. She wore a red kippah dress with slits along the side and a white circular pattern on the front. On the other side of the Uchiha was pale-skinned with dark hair and eyes. He wore a short dark gray jacket and black hanbu pants. Strapped to his back was a ten. Next to the pale-skinned shinobi was their Jonin sensei, someone he recognized instantly. Kakashi Haddock, S-class shinobi and known throughout the world as Ka plus Ninja no Kakashi, Copy Ninja Kakashi. He still hadn't changed since he last saw him. He still wore the standard Konoha shinobi outfit. "Hello, Naruto-kun." Hiruzen greeted with a grandfatherly smile on his face. Naruto bowed lowly before turning to face Kakashi with a smile on his face. "It's good to see you again, Kakashi Nai." Kakashi gave an eye smile. "And you too, Itaudo. You've grown." Meanwhile, the 3 genin watched the interaction between the 3 people with close scrutiny. Kakashi had always been kind to them, but Sasuke had seen the way he kept distance away from them. To see Kakashi refer to this unknown boy the same age as him as little brother was shocking. "So this is the Kikbi jinchuriki." Sai thought as his eyes trailed over the form of the jinchuriki. He would admit that he was intimidated and wary of the boy that was the same age as himself. His very being exuded power that shouldn't belong to someone of that age. Danzo-sama will want to be informed of his arrival. "Naruto-kun, where is Jiraiya?" Hiruzen asked as he saw his student wasn't present. "Right here, Sarutobi-sensei." Jiraiya proclaimed from his position on the window. Naruto smiled at the casual greeting of his sensei, while Kakashi nodded his head in the man's direction, something which was returned in kind. Sasuke and Sakura meanwhile went wide-eyed at the sight of a legendary shinobi, something which Sai tried to recreate but failed miserably at. That kid doesn't have any emotions. I can't sense any." Naruto turned to face Sai and saw that despite the emotion he was displaying it was a lie. He could fool every genin and maybe a few chunin, but he couldn't fool a Bijk that had the ability to sense the emotions of everyone within the range of his senses. A range that spanned the size of the village twice over. "I'll keep an eye on him." Naruto shut the connection down between him and Kurama before focusing entirely on the people in the room. "Team 7, you are dismissed." The Hokage informed the genin and team and they left. Naruto turned to face the door for a few moments before turning to face the Hokage once more. "You can leave if you wish, Naruto-kun." Smiling, Naruto nodded his head and waved to the 2 men before opening the door to leave. "And Naruto-kun, it's good to see you again." You too, Gigi. Smiling at the nickname he had sorely missed, the Sandaime then turned to face Jiraiya. So, how has he been? Hiruzen asked curiously. The welfare of his surrogate grandson had always been in his mind ever since the incident 8 years ago. Kid's been well. He's still angry with the villagers, but he's willing to keep it professional, though if they attack him, he will deal with them in a way he feels fit. Best warn the villain council about that part. Hiruzen smiled, and while he was a bit upset about the killing part, he couldn't fault Naruto. In fact, he probably would have done the same. I will be calling a meeting in a few days. I will warn them if they plan to mistreat him in any way will result in their business being put under new management. Hiruzen informed with a smile growing on his face. Jiraiya snorted in amusement before walking towards the couch. It was subtle, and most shinobi would have missed the movement of his wrist. The Anbu didn't and disappeared from the room at the sign of a dismissal. Each confident that the combined might of Jiraiya and the Sandaime would easily hold off any assassin. Hiruzen meanwhile pressed his hand against a seal on the desk and channeled some chakra into it. All over the room, a complex sealing array formed, and with it the two began talking more in depth on Naruto's development. Naruto and Kakashi had arrived at Training Ground 7 within a matter of minutes after leaving the Hokage's office, Kakashi's students having left to do their own thing. Now the two were stood in the training ground talking about what they had done in the last few years. It had been a shock to learn that his last two surrogate big brother, Itachi and Kakashi, had become S-class shinobi. Even more so when he had learned that Kakashi was a Hokage candidate and had even been asked to take over the position numerous times but had declined each and every single time. As a form of revenge, the Sandaime had forced him to take on a team. I'm gonna say, you never struck me as a teacher Kakashi Nai. Naruto jokingly said and Kakashi gave an eye smile. Ma. I can teach, it's just none of the academy students were the one I wanted to take on as a student. Naruto smiled at hearing that Kakashi wanted to take him on as a student. But it seems Jiraiya-sama beat me and took you on as his apprentice. You can still teach me, Kakashi Nai. Naruto protested. Iro Sennin is one of the strongest shinobi alive and you're near in terms of strength to him. That's where you are wrong, Itaudo. Kakashi corrected and took a seat on the ground. Naruto copied him. Well, I'm ranked as an equal to Jiraiya-same, that is farther from the truth. I could probably defeat him in Taijutsu and Kenjutsu, but when Jiraiya-sama uses his jutsu and everything he has in his repertoire, coupled with his experience, he would completely destroy me. It'd be like a fight between a genin and a jonin. He would play with me for a bit before crushing me. This admission from his brother was shocking to Naruto. Was the gap between Jiraiya and Kakashi that big? He had always known that his godfather was strong, but hearing it from someone else was shocking, and to hear how much stronger was even more so. In a fight between himself and Kakashi he would lose as soon as Kakashi took him seriously. In fact, most B-rank shinobi would beat him as soon as they got seriously. The only reason he had beaten B and even A-rank shinobi before was because they never took him seriously from the beginning. It was said that the difference between a B and A-rank shinobi was only experience. The difference between an A-rank shinobi and an S-rank shinobi was the same as a difference between a genin and jonin. A big difference. In terms of skill, Naruto could safely say he was definitely C-ranked. To finally realize how big of a gap there was between himself and Kakashi and in turn Jiraiya was daunting. How could he possibly stack up against monsters such as them? Kakashi saw this and smiled internally. His little brother was finally realizing that rank meant nothing, only skill counted. Naruto clenched his fist tightly, but before he could think on it anymore he felt a hand placed on his shoulder. Looking up he saw Kakashi giving him his trademark eye smile. Then with his spare arm he passed over a piece of black cloth. Taking it, he looked at it and then turned to Kakashi in confusion. What's this? That Itaudo is a face mask of the Hada clan. Shock coursed through him in waves. In fact, that was my father's. I want you to have it. Wear it with pride and know that even if you're not my little brother by blood, that you will always be a member of the Hada clan. Once again he ducked his head to hide the tears that threatened to spill. Smiling, Kakashi ruffled Naruto's hair and stood up. He turned around and made to leave so that he wouldn't be late for his meeting the other Jonin senseis, but Naruto stopped him. Wait, Kakashi Nai. Naruto exclaimed and was relieved when Kakashi turned around. Can we spar? I want to get stronger and I need to learn my limits. Plus, I'm getting bored of having my ass handed to me by Iro Sennin every day. Smiling, Kakashi nodded and felt his chest swell with pride as he looked at the face mask covering the bottom half of his little brother's face. Ready yourself, Itaudo. Kakashi warned and lowered himself into Hada clan signature Taijutsu style, the Yasei no Sudoraku, Feral Strike. Naruto nodded his head and dropped into his own style. Lesson 1. Taijutsu. Then the two shot forwards, Kakashi notably faster but holding back as to not end the fight prematurely. Kurenai was angry, Asuma was annoyed, and Guy was being well Guy. The three had been waiting for Kakashi for about an hour, an. The fight between Kakashi and Naruto only began 10 minutes ago and hasn't been going on for an hour. Now the three were walking towards where Kurenai had sensed Kakashi's chakra signature. While she wasn't a sensor, Kurenai had learned to pick up on chakra signatures. This was different to an actual sensor as they would be able to tell the emotions of a person and what they were doing, some even had been able to predict what they were doing and read their mind based entirely on their chakra signature. So the three had set out for training ground 7 so that they would drag to the Akimichi Barbeck so they could discuss their genin and see who was currently in the lead for the bet. The bet in question was one to see who had the best genin team by the end of the year. Guy, however, was not part of this due to his team having an additional year of pure training and missions, but he still joined their conversations and acted as the neutral party in the dealings. Currently, Kurenai was in the lead due to the fact she was the only one who taught her team anything. Kakashi and Asuma left their teams to do their training on their own. Something that incredibly annoyed her. On top of that, Kakashi had the nerve to make her wait for an hour with a man who was dead set on getting in her pants, despite her lack of interest and a man-child obsessed with youth. Oh yes, she would have her revenge whether he be an S-rank shinobi or not. It mattered little to her. Now imagining the surprise of the three of them when they saw Kakashi currently engaged against a young blonde boy no older than 13. They both moved with such speed which was shocking. What speed? Kurenai thought in shock as they watched the two blurs that were Kakashi and Naruto. Occasionally they would be nothing but black blurs, then they would appear once more in a fierce bout of taijutsu. The strength of this kid is insane. Asuma had to remove his cigar from his mouth lest it drop to the ground, his mouth too wide to keep it there. So this is your Itaudo, his flames of youth shine brightly. Guy exclaimed internally, not wishing to distract the two shinobi from their current fight. He watched as Kakashi lashed out with a roundhouse kick to Naruto's head, something the jinchuriki just managed to block. Even so the force lifted him off his feet, but before he got too far away, he threw a kick of his own that Kakashi easily knocked away. Spinning through the air, Naruto landed on his feet before disappearing and appearing in front of Kakashi, with one fist drawn back. The Jonin ignored the feint and grabbed his little brother's left leg. Naruto went with the momentum and spun round with his last remaining leg. Only for Kakashi to catch that too. Now what do you plan to do, Itaudo? Before he could think any further he saw the smirk on Naruto's face, followed by the buildup of chakra. Followed by Naruto exploding. It was only due to Kawarimi no Jutsu, body replacement technique, that allowed him to escape unharmed. Couldn't beat the basics. Walking forwards, Naruto and Kakashi found themselves back where they started. This time however, their breath was bit deeper. Not much though. Kakashi had barely put any effort into the fight, sure he had put more in that when he fought his genin team, but enough to still making him slightly out of breath. Naruto on the other hand had put every bit of effort he could into that singular bout and it was only due to his nearly limitless stamina that kept him from passing out straight away. Not only that, but his weight and resistance seals were already released as to match his brother's speed. Well done, Itaudo. Very good, Jiraiya-sama taught you well. Kakashi praised. Meanwhile, Asuma and Kurenai felt like they had a bucket of cold water poured over them. The kid before them was the student of Jiraiya. They had heard rumors that he had taken on another student, a student that fought the jinchuriki and came out victor, but they hadn't thought it would be the kid before them. Thanks, Kakashi Nai. You're not so bad yourself. Naruto channeled chakra into the seals on both palms and in a cloud of smoke, shuriken appeared in between his fingers. There was but a split-second wait before Naruto launched them all towards Kakashi. But more and more appeared from the seals in his palms until over 100 of the deadly projectiles were flying towards the S-rank shinobi. However, he didn't seem scared in the slightest and instead he calmly summoned his father's blade into his hand. The Hakinchakura TM, white light chakra saber. It hadn't taken a while for the pieces of his father's blade to be put back together into the famous blade it once was after he broke it in the Second Shinobi World War. It had been done though and he had taken up Kenjutsu once more and surpassed his old level of strength. While he was nowhere near the level of a Kenjutsu master, the 7 ninja swordsmen of the Mr. Kushina for that matter. He was strong enough to hold them off, if not beat them when combined with the rest of his skills. He prepared himself and waited until the first wave got close before calmly parrying and blocking each and every single one of them. He would occasionally dodge a few that he could not, but the rest he easily managed to remove. Then came the second wave, this time he noticed the subtle lightning sparks over them. Brayton. He felt like a kid in a candy store when he realized that Naruto had the same elemental affinity as himself. If only he knew. This time he had to be more careful and put a tiny bit more effort into the fight as a result of the shuriken being sharper and faster. The process repeated with Naruto incorporating wind and then using shuriken cage bunshin no jutsu, shuriken shadow clone technique into the next 2 waves. Then came the 5th and final wave and with a shout of Kaiten. Kankakik no jutsu, fire style. fireball technique, and multiple shuriken were encased in a single fireball that had a diameter of Kakashi. There 10 in total, and Kakashi smiled proudly before jumping backwards, his hands blurring through a series of hand seals. Suiton no jutsu, water style. Water bullet technique. From Kakashi's mouth, multiple bullets of water shot forwards and collided with the fireballs. Both techniques blanketing the area in hot steam. Once again, Kakashi had to use Kawarimi no jutsu, body replacement technique, to remove himself from harm. He whistled in amazement as he heard the telltale sign of shuriken embedding into wood with a thunk noise. The accuracy of the shuriken was quite frankly terrifying. Suiton no jutsu, water style. Water dragon bullet technique. Kraton Jibashi, lightning style. Electromagnetic murder. Kakashi turned wide-eyed to stare up at the dragon rushing towards him, its watery form covered in electricity. As the fight had progressed, the three had found themselves more and more shocked by the power shown to them by the young boy. Guy had always known that Naruto would have been powerful, in fact he expected it. What with the boy been a jinchuriki and an Uzumaki? That alone with him been trained by Jiraiya would have turned any average shinobi into a top-class shinobi. But to see just how powerful was shocking, and he was excited to see just how powerful the boy would become as he grew older. Kurenai and Asuma were in varying states of disrepair. To them, it shouldn't be possible for anyone to be this powerful at the age of 13. To be able to make 10 extremely condensed and hot fireballs was incredibly difficult for any shinobi with a Kaiten, fire release, was hard. Most only succeeded in making them bigger, but not hotter, and to do that you had to condense the fireball. Then for the boy to follow up with a large dragon that towered over the trees and coated in electricity was no easy task. How is this possible? Kurenai asked breathlessly as she watched Kakashi backpedal from the dragon. She could tell he was thinking on how to combat against the dragon. It never ventured too far from Naruto as its tail had formed a shield around Naruto's body, meaning its range was limited. However, when Kakashi got too far away, physical clones would appear. Some were cage buncheons, shadow clones, some exploded, and the rest were a mix of the elemental clones. There's no way he should have this much chakra, it's just unreal. Asuma's cigar had long since dropped from his hand, and he was too busy watching the fight before him to do anything about it. The amount of chakra the boy has is not the problem here, Sarutobi-san, he's beating Haddock-san. Kurenai all but exclaimed. Her voice never raised in tempo, though her voice was laced with hysteria. Guy on the other hand turned to them, his face uncharacteristically serious. Kakashi isn't losing this fight. He informed them sternly. Far from it, in fact. How does that? He waved his hand towards Kakashi, whose cloths were slightly singed from a Kaiten. Cage Bunshin no Jutsu, fire style. Shadow clone technique. He then spun round and dispelled multiple shadow clones with a single kick. Look like he isn't losing. The kids had him on the back foot ever since he started spamming shuriken. Kurenai nodded her head in agreement and narrowed her eyes at Naruto in the cocoon of water and lightning. She could just make out the side of him bent over and doing something to the ground. Because Kakashi isn't using his full power. In fact, since this fight started, he has only used a quarter of his full strength. Guy would know, he was the only one in the village besides the Sandaime that could force Kakashi to use his full power. Even then, Guy had to use the Hachiman, 8 gates, to do so. Kurenai and Asuma turned back to the fight with a new sense of fear for their fellow sensei. They both knew Kakashi's reputation. The way he copied his enemies' techniques in battle and then used those same techniques to kill them. They had heard how he knew over 1,000 jutsu and was one of Konoha's most prominent figureheads and a Hokage candidate. They knew that there was monsters out there. Shinobi so powerful that they could take on entire battalions of shinobi and come out unscathed. Kakashi was one of them, and they realized that despite being nonchalant most of the time, underneath it was a monster just waiting to be unleashed on the world. Ton. Tatapa, wind style. Great breakthrough. From Kakashi's mouth a large blast of wind struck the dragon and traveled all the way down its body. The water that once made it collapsing to the ground in puddles. Naruto, however, was unperturbed by this as he had just finished his sealing array. Now he needed to move on to another positon and do the same again. He already had 3 parts of the seal done. The area that he and Kakashi had been sat in had been the area he had put the first part of the seal. The area where he had gone toe-to-toe against Kakashi in Taijutsu had been where he had put the second, and now where he stood was the 3rd part. Just 2 more to go and he would be done. Kakashi had just finished dispatching the rest of his clones before the 2 were facing off against one another once more. This time they were both gripping the handle of their blades in one hand. There was no signal. No sign of the Kenjutsu battle beginning. One moment they were separate and the next they were pushing against one another. Naruto with his blade held vertically and Kakashi's horizontally. However, Naruto felt himself sliding backwards and he dug his feet into the ground as to try and stop himself from losing any more ground. Lesson 2. Ninjutsu. You pass. Kakashi spoke up, gaining Naruto's attention. He grit his teeth as his footing nearly left him and he was pushed backwards further. Kakashi even going as far as to take a step forwards. Lesson 3. Jinjutsu. Cursing, Naruto closed his eyes and jumped backwards. Channeling chakra into them, his eyes snapped open and easily dispelled the jinjutsu that had surrounded him. But these eyes, Kakashi Nai. I can see everything you just did. Naruto proclaimed and gripped his blade tighter. Kakashi meanwhile raised an eyebrow at the odd-looking Sharingan. Unlike his, it seemed that Naruto could turn them on and off at will, but he also kept features from his previous eyes. The reptilian pupil was still present with the tomo surrounding it. In his opinion it was much cooler than his own. Oh, looks like you got a bad case of pink eye. He gave an eye smile when he saw the twitch of Naruto's eye. Ma. No need to get so angry, Ataudo, I'm sure it will go in time. Wahahaha. Kurama's laughter ringed in his head and Naruto winced at the unexpected noise. Pink eye. Classic. There was more laughter from his tenant and Naruto had a mental image of him wiping tears of laughter from his eyes with a single clawed finger. Shut up, Kurama no baka. Naruto shouted internally, but Kurama continued to laugh. I don't know if you looked in the mirror recently, but your eyes are the same color as your own. So you have pink eye as well, you lazy bastard. That shut up the Kikbi. But that said and done, Naruto shot forwards and engaged Kakashi in a clash of steel. They were practically dancing all over the training ground as they blocked, parried, slashed and hacked at one another. While Kakashi was sturdy, barely moving and utilizing his superior physical capabilities and experience to not do very much in the way of work. Naruto on the other hand was testing out his new Kenjutsu style. It was nowhere near completion and used the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique, in conjunction with the Uzumaki Kenjutsu style. The Uzumaki Kenjutsu style had no name, but it involved multiple aspects of other Kenjutsu styles and also a lot of acrobatics to surprise and put the enemy off balance. Hit. Naruto flipped and slashed at Kakashi, landing on the ground in a crouch that dived forwards with his sword pointed directly and spun madly. What is it, Kurama? Rolling on the ground, Naruto backflipped and lashed out with a double-footed stomp that Kakashi stepped back to avoid. Following this, Naruto spun around and went to cut his legs. To avoid this, Kakashi jumped into the air and kicked Naruto in the face. You better hit this pervert at least once for the pink eye comment. Shaking his head in amusement and to clear his head, Naruto spat out some blood before rushing to engage Kakashi once more. Oh, don't you worry, I will get him at least once before this fight ends. Kurama and Naruto gave a similar grin that no one could see due to the mask, but they felt it. Kakashi raised an eyebrow in surprise when he felt the oppressive chakra come forth a tiny bit. No one other than them could feel it due to it only been a small amount, but it was enough to make a difference. All of his physical capabilities had been augmented and it showed when Kakashi just barely managed to raise his blade and block a strike. Even when he did, he was forced backwards. Then things began to change. The tempo of the match swinging in favor from Kakashi to Naruto. Every time Kakashi blocked one strike he would have to quickly react and block another strike. The process repeating and putting him further off balance. The lucky kick from Kakashi forced Naruto backwards, but he felt a small sting of pain from his left arm and leg. Then more and more. Looking down he saw small cuts and tears in his outfit, with some bleeding lightly. Not enough for him to worry, but enough that it made them sting and bleed. Looking up, he turned to stare at Naruto with a proud gaze. Very well done, Ataudo. Kakashi congratulated. Naruto smirked and formed the ram seal, and with it a barrier formed. Uzumaki Kenjutsu. Tsu no point of kin, Uzumaki sealing techniques. 4-point seal. Naruto spoke calmly before he placed his hands on the ground. Inside the admittedly large blue barrier, 5 seals glowed brightly. Uzumaki Kenjutsu. Gajim Shiksoku Fukin, Uzumaki sealing technique. 5 elements convergence seal. From each seal, the 5 elements sprung forth and converged on Kakashi just like they did with Yujido, and the ground shook as a result of the explosion. When the smoke cleared, all that stood in the center of the seal was a small smoking crater, and in that was the splinters that once belonged to a log. Naruto gasped as he felt cold steel placed against his neck. Freezing, he slowly rose and heard Kakashi say, I win. Naruto smirked and from his back 5 chakra chains shot out and pierced through Kakashi, only for a log to take his place once more. He looked round to see Kakashi sprinting towards him, and Naruto copied him, his chains shooting forwards and piercing through the clone. Lightning coursed down his chains and struck his body. With a groan of pain he dropped to the ground, his form steaming. The 2 hands burst from the ground and gripped his legs and pulled him into the ground till only his head remained free. Naruto was about to free himself, though he stopped when he once again felt a kunai pressed against him, this time against the top of his head. Meanwhile, his eyes stared along the length of Kakashi's sword. Groaning, he admitted his defeat and pulled himself free. He asked the question that had been on his mind for the past couple of seconds. When did you use the Kawarimi no Jutsu, body replacement technique? Kakashi smiled. Just as you formed the ram seal. I recognized a buildup of chakra to realize you were going to use Kenjutsu. He had spared against both Minato and Kushina, masters of Kenjutsu, to know when the subtle art was going to be used. Nodding his head, Naruto grinned when he took in Kakashi's state. "Got you a few times though." He grinned, though all anyone would see would be an eye smile similar to Kakashi's. Ruffling Naruto's hair, the two began walking towards the village. "That you did it, Tauto. Meet me here at around 5 every afternoon. I finished teaching my students then, so I can then focus on teaching you a few things." Naruto nodded his head happily. "What do you actually teach your team?" "Well, the council are forcing me to teach the last Uchiha so they can have another powerful shinobi, but all I do is give him a scroll from the library with a basic technique on for him to learn. I refuse to teach him anything more than that until he can overcome his hatred. What the council don't realize is that if I teach Sasuke as he will grow too powerful and we could have a repeat of his brother." Naruto winced at the reminder of how one of his older brother figures had gone insane and killed his entire family. It was a reminder that been introduced to the world of the shinobi too early, with no real attachment and too much responsibility is not good. "What about the others?" Naruto looked towards Kakashi to see him reading a little orange book, the same book his godfather is the author. Seeing that Kakashi was reading while walking, Naruto decided to copy him just like any younger brother did when their older brother did something. His book, however, was on Kenjutsu and not porn. "Sakura is a fangirl and has no desire to learn, so I'm not going to force her. If she expresses any desire to learn, then I will gladly teach her. Until that point I'm not doing anything." Kakashi paused in his speech to give a perverted giggle that made Naruto sweat drop. As for Sai, he is more focused on drawing in his booklet and prefers to train alone. He decided to forego the piece of information about Sai being a member of Naruto. "Are you pleased with how strong my student is now, Danzo?" Jiraiya questioned with a certain steel to his voice that demanded Danzo not question him any further. Speaking of Danzo, the man had come to join their conversation around halfway through and had been quite patronizing to Jiraiya. Something that got on the nerves of the Gamasenin, Toad Sage. To pacify both men, Hiruzen had used his crystal ball to watch the fight between Kakashi and Naruto. It had been quite surprising, as hearing and seeing about something are two very different things. Yes. Very much so. Neither Jiraiya nor Hiruzen liked the way in which Danzo spoke. Well, Danzo had been working together with Hiruzen for the past 8 years to improve Konoha's infrastructure, economy and overall military might. He was still very much the shadow of the great tree that was Konoha. He thrived in shadows and no one could tell what Danzo had planned. "You wouldn't happen to have anything nefarious planned, would you, Danzo?" Hiruzen pressed and Danzo stared at the two who were stronger than he would ever be. "No, the jinchuriki is a powerful shinobi who will walk in the light, not the shadow." Not many people would get the reference Danzo had made, but Hiruzen and Jiraiya were not most people. Both sagged in relief at the admission that Danzo would not be trying to get control of Naruto. Hiruzen then turned to face his student. "Now tell me, Jiraiya-kun, do you think Naruto-kun is ready for the Chunin exams?" Jiraiya looked at him in amusement and chuckled slightly. "You're asking me that, even though you just saw what he can do. The kid is a monster for his age, he has his father's ability to soak up all the knowledge and his mother's desire to perfect everything and anything she learned to its fullest. If the kid's not ready, then most Chunin aren't deserving of their title." Hiruzen smiled thinly. "You know what I mean, Jiraiya-kun. Then Chunin is about more than just skill and power. It's about how you use. And that's why I repeat what I said. If the kid's not ready, then most Chunin aren't deserving of the title." Nodding his head, Hiruzen leaned back and then interlocked his fingers together. "He will enter the tournament on his own and will be registered as your apprentice. I want the basics of his skills logged into our shinobi registration. I want you personally overseeing this, Danzo." There was a pregnant pause. Not too much, but just enough that it shows he is a powerful shinobi. Danzo bowed and left the room while Jiraiya left to go find his godson. "Orochimaru, let's see how you plan to get around this obstacle." He had no doubt that they had a spy in their midst. No doubt the spy would sneak in and join the genin in the Chunin exams to observe Sasuke Uchiha. However, Orochimaru would never invade Konoha without a backup in place for every prominent shinobi they had. But the jinchuriki competing, the spy would definitely try and get every bit of information he could and then some. He had made a mistake by allowing Orochimaru to escape, and that mistake had haunted him ever since. It was time for him to rectify the mistake once and for all. The next few months had been interesting to say the least for Naruto. All of Konoha was getting prepared for the Chunin exams. Merchants, civilians and nobles from all over the elemental nations had been pouring into Konoha in droves. In that time Naruto had been training non-stop so that he could show the true power of Konoha and the Uzumaki clan to the world. The world had forgotten about his clan, and Konoha had been severely weakened after the Third Shinobi World War, the Kikbi attack, and the loss of the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. They had recovered however, Kakashi and Mido Guy had both joined the Anbu again in Kakashi's case and had become S-ranked shinobi that were feared throughout the elemental nations. Even more so when they worked together. In fact when fighting alongside one another, they had been labeled a SS-ranked tag team. The second team in existence beside the current Raikage and his brother to gain such notoriety. Speaking of his training, Naruto would spend the first few early morning hours training alongside Mido Guy himself and his young lookalike, Rock Lee. It had been difficult and Naruto had been shocked to find someone over than himself so motivated to grow stronger. In fact, Rock Lee was the only one who beside Yujito near his age that he could go all out against. The extra challenge had been welcomed greatly. Afterwards he would use training ground 43 and 44 where he would train alongside the Takebetsu Jonin Anko Midarashi, also known as the Konoha no Hibiagin, Snake Mistress of Konoha. The two had met when Naruto had been fighting a group of chakra-mutated spiders. After defeating them he had come across a stash of dango. He had been hungry so he ate them. When he was on his last one, Anko arrived and attacked him without warning. It had been a close fight, but Anko beat him and then every day after that she had been there to meet him and train with Hai. While his clones would improve his chakra control, Genjutsu, Ninjutsu, Kenjutsu, Taijutsu and learning to use more of the Kickbee's chakra. The original would switch between sparring with Anko, playing tag with her summons to improve his stealth, and fighting the multiple chakra-mutated creatures in the Forest of Death. Then he would rest up for a bit before going to meet with Kakashi. They would start things off with a spar before Kakashi would teach him more ninjutsu and jinjutsu. One thing Naruto realized was that he would always be an amateur jinjutsu user, never excelling at it. It didn't bother him because with the Sharingan coupled with his massive chakra reserves and Kurama he could break out with any jinjutsu, no matter how complex or powerful. Jiraiya however, had been absent for the past month. His reasoning being that he had business outside of Konoha to deal with. Naruto didn't mind as it didn't affect his training much, plus he could tell his godfather was anxious about something. Now he was walking towards the academy building where the first part of the Chunin exams would be held. His outfit hadn't changed at all, except for the fact he had decided to keep the face mask given to him by Kakashi, the Konoha headband wrapped around his neck and now had a second blade, a tantrum hidden underneath his cloak, while his katana was sealed away in his wrist like usual. Anko pointed out that people will prepare for him to unseal his weapons and that he should always have weapons hidden on his person and not just in seals. His katana had been too big to hide, therefore he had gotten a tantrum as a second blade. He even began learning the Hada clan's dual-bladed Kenjutsu style and the Uzumaki Kenjutsu style. His dream was to combine the two to make a much better and more dangerous style. Walking into the building he clearly saw a few genin from multiple villages walking around in the academy. There was a lot of teams from Konoha, a few from Suna, Aim, Taki, Kusa and Odo, despite it being a new village. The final village making his eyes narrow in anger as he recognized the music symbol from the strange six-armed individual that attacked the village. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto walked through the crowd of people and walked up 2 flights of stairs and made his way across the corridor to the stairs on the other side. He never understood why they put the stairs in the opposite side to the floor below, but he didn't really care either. On his way he drew a few looks due to him being alone however, he barely spared them a glance. "Ah, Naruto-kun." Naruto smiled before schooling his features. He wiped out a book from thin air and continued walking. "Naruto-kun." Then Lee appeared in front of him, a large toothy grin plastered on his face. Behind him he could see Lee's 2 teammates, Niji Haika and Tenten Higurashi. It took a lot of effort to restrain a smile as he copied his older brother perfectly. Right down to the dull and bored tone in which he spoke his rehearsed line. "I'm sorry, did you say something, Lee?" He turned to Lee with a bored look in his eyes and mentally cheered alongside with Kurama as they watched Lee grip his hair tightly in frustration. Meanwhile, Kakashi sneezed and suddenly felt very proud of himself. "Ah, curse you, my eternal rival, and your hip attitude." Flames burned in Lee's eyes as he stood straight. "I shall prove today that my flames of youth burn brighter than your calm and cool attitude," he proclaimed, earning a few odd looks from the people watching the events unfold. Lee paid them no attention and looked towards his rival, only to see him gone. Tenten tried to smother her giggle with her hand but failed miserably. She had never seen anyone do that to Lee before, not even Niji had been able to do that. Speaking of the Haika prodigy, he stared at the back of Naruto with some akin to interest. He had seen the way in which Lee and Naruto acted, it was almost frighteningly familiar to the interaction between Kakashi and Guy. Izumo and Kitetsu shared a glance and grinned. "Looks like another Kakashi and Guy rivalry," Kitetsu stated. The rivalry between the Jonin rivals served as a never-ending source of hilarity for everyone within and hearing range. Which was quite loud when Guy was involved. Back with Naruto, he had made it to the classroom where everyone was meeting up for the first part of the Chunin exams to take place. There was only 3 teams present, one from Konoha, one from Suna and one from Kumo. He instantly recognized the team from Kumo as the same group who attacked him just before his match against Yujito. It seemed that they had all been put into the same team after all. The Redeed from Suna. Naruto looked towards the Redeed who returned his gaze. He's the jinchuriki of Shukaku. Relaying his thanks to Kurama, Naruto took a seat at one of the desks in the corner of the room, farthest away from the door and therefore the rest of the genin. Do you think he will be a problem? Kurama hummed for a few moments. Well, he is the weakest of us, Bijk. If you put him in area with lots of sand and even I would have trouble defeating him in battle. Not only that, but all of his hosts have displayed great aptitude for Photon, Wind Release, Ninjutsu and even Jiten, Magnet Release. Naruto nodded his head at the information and looked around the room to judge who would be a challenge. The Redeed was definitely one, the blonde female from Kumo was also one. She was calm, cool and collected, something that didn't sit well with him. Only those two arrogant or strong enough weren't anxious, and she wasn't arrogant. Far from it in fact. Then there was the guy from Konoha with silver hair and glasses. Something about him didn't sit well with Naruto, there was definitely more to him than meets the eye. Over the course of an hour the room filled up with more and more genin until came the last group of genin. They were loud and far too naive to the way these exams worked. Each of them lost in their little world to notice the killing intent been directed at them by most of the genin. Pitiful it was, but it was killing intent all the same. Then came the glasses-wearing Konoha shinobi, who introduced himself as Kabuto. His acute hearing picked up on what they were saying. At first it was just about how they should keep the noise down and then the tenseness of the situation. The most interesting part of the young man's speech was when he introduced his ninja info cards. They had been introduced to the shinobi world in the Second Shinobi World War, but afterwards they had all but been forgotten. Rock Lee of Konohagakure and Gaara Sunagakure. Kakashi was right when he said that the Uchiha's voice reeked of arrogance.